tieni pinta que dale.
Same level. Do over. Are we ready?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning. Welcome, everybody. This is the Thursday, July 16th SSR meeting. And as I was saying momentarily, it is the one we've been waiting for because the rubber is finally meeting the road. We are talking hard numbers about density. We're talking about things we thought we were going to be talking about from the get-go. It's showtime. I think you all have an agenda in front of you. If you don't, you can share with the person next to you. And we have a lot to cover. We have 3 hours. Amy, you look concerned.
Don't have an agenda.
Oh.
Handouts.
Okay, well, I'll help with the agenda by saying that we are going to quickly review what our purpose is, what we want to do today, and then we're going to break into groups and do it. And then we're going to come back and share. And then we're going to see if we want to continue meeting or if we feel like our work here is done. If that sounds good, I'm going to hand it over to Jen to get us rolling. I will say welcome to everybody on the Zoom, including Tony and Nina. I'll compliment Nina and Elaine and Nick for going carefully through the document and making a lot of compliments. Thank you, guys. I read them, but I deliberately didn't make my own because eventually I'm going to be in a decider role and I didn't want to presuppose anything. So I'm really excited about the conversation today. And I thank John Cohn for listening in. Good morning, Mr. Cohn. We won't be able to give you the microphone, Mr. Cohn. We've got a lot of people on this crew, but you're welcome to listen in. And when the Planning Commission and eventually the commissioners take up any recommendations this group makes, your voice will be welcome. And I'm glad you're here now. All right, Jen, did I set the stage well enough?
Yes, absolutely. You gave me enough time to figure out the technology. So
Okay,
thank you so
perfect.
much.
That was my,
I have one question.
yes, Amy.
You mentioned Nina's comments. Did you not get the rest of us?
I did not notice yours, but I bet you did them.
I did.
I didn't see them,
Okay.
but I'm appreciative of you as well. Gold star, Amy.
Hmm.
When did you put them?
Monday. Or Sunday. It was Sunday or Monday. I saw Elaine's when I did that. But
Okay, I saw Elaine's, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good.
I think there was a little bit of confusion about you had to be logged in, maybe, in order for them to be saved. Was that what was going on? Did you actually have a login, Amy?
Typically, you don't need to be logged in for
No.
them to save, but you do need to be logged in to have subsequent sessions.
Oh,
So if you're
okay.
gonna do it in.
I did it in one
multiple
session.
sessions.
Yeah.
Or to see your own notes in multiple sessions, but I think you guys should all. see
I
each
saw
other.
my notes.
Yeah.
I saw my notes, yeah.
I bet they're in there.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll take a look.
Well, Jen, it also wasn't, and not to be critiquing, but also it wasn't super intuitive that there was the final edits to the land use code in there too.
Right.
It was like one document and then just the drop down menu,
Okay.
which really is the meat, that document is where. So I don't know if everybody saw that.
Yeah, I started editing the land
Yeah,
use
yeah,
code
yeah.
and then Drea directed me
Same.
to the other document.
Yeah.
Not editing, making comments on the land use
On
code.
that, good. Good. Always hiccups with technology, I suppose. But thank you guys for getting into the document and taking a look. For those of you who either have had a chance to look at it, maybe didn't make comments or haven't had a chance, we'll go over kind of the main points today that we're going to be talking about. So our agenda for today is kind of a recap and framing of what we're trying to do here. Refining the draft recommendations. We want to really focus on zoning and density. That's where most of the comments have been. That's where we all, I think, keep wanting to really dive into and make sure that it works. Oh.
Keep in mind, I've already got that.
Okay. And then workforce housing types as well. We're gonna try to break this up into two parts today. Part one will be the zoning and density section. We'll give a little presentation here, try to give as much background as I can as to kind of how we got to where we are. And then we'll break into two groups, three for the folks online. Robin is online to facilitate that meeting. In the room, we'll have two groups to really dive in and discuss the zoning and density questions. So we'll have about 45 minutes to really talk about that. Come back to the whole group and we'll do a report back. The second half will be kind of diving into all the other pieces. What we're going to do is at that break moment, where we come back together, we're gonna see, did we have a good discussion? Do we need to have more discussion? Do we need to move on to the next topics? We'll kind of use that as a pivot point and figure out how to move forward with the rest of the meeting. We've got 3 hours, but as we all know, 2 hours hasn't been enough. So hopefully 3 is enough for us to really take our time and have a great conversation. So that's kind of the format for the day. Like I said, we can be a little bit flexible on that second half of the day, depending on how the first half goes. Just a quick reminder, you guys have seen this slide 6 times now, but just a quick reminder of, your advisory capacity. I think you guys have served really well in that role. When we get to it, if we need to do kind of like we did last time, a quick round robin, thumbs up, thumbs down, see where we're at on the recommendations, we certainly can. So thank you all for your dedication to the project so far. Like we said this morning, this is where the rubber really, really meets the road. We have the document. Now we get to refine it and make sure that it's what we want to put out there. I just wanted to highlight progress to date. You all are aware of the 5 previous meetings to this one. Just wanted to remind everyone that we had met initially in October to talk through what the intent of the project was. At the same time, we had our group of listening sessions with community members to try to start to understand, where we needed to head with this, what was working, what's not. And then we moved on to developing that preliminary report, met again in December, January, March, and April. And through all of those, we've been kind of refining these component pieces to the recommendations that are in front of you now. And also through that time, you'll remember we spent a lot of time on the prioritized housing review that was adopted a month ago-ish. So again, today's focus is on zoning and density, a little bit on the additional workforce housing types, just see how far we can get with everything. And our tentative schedule, following this meeting, we have a joint commission or work session with Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioners on July 29th. Following that, we'll take all the feedback and refine any updates to the documents to move forward into potential hearings in September. So the tabled items, you'll remember throughout the process, there's been a few items that we all agreed to some varying degree that they were not appropriate for this project. So I think the parking requirements, very early in the conversation, everyone said, I just don't think that's going to really take us to the next step. So we took that off the table. I'm going to skip campers for a second. Fee reductions and waivers we talked about a couple of meetings ago. Incentive programs for deed restricted ADUs, adjust the employee housing mitigation impact fee structure. We talked about that last time, that that would be something that would need a little more input from the housing authority. So it's still captured in the document, but set aside for a future effort. The TDR program, transfer of development rights, we all agreed that that was a very extensive process that maybe didn't suit itself well for this process, but maybe this process could set the stage for continuing to look into that in the future. And then consolidating residential zones. I want to highlight 3 on the list that came up in some of the comments that people made. One of them was incorporating campers, RVs, and vans. I do realize that I think that was one of those that fell in kind of the lukewarm zone. There were some people in support and some not in support. So that's why we had tabled that one. We can reinvestigate that in the second half of our conversation today, and maybe staff can weigh in on it at that time as well. It would be a little bigger edit to the code is my assumption at the moment, but we can still talk about that if we need to bring it back on the table. New incentive programs for deed restricted ADUs. I think there was a question about that. Now that we've expanded the ADU allowance, do we need to go back to that deed restriction? And then consolidating residential zones. We had decided to do that early on based on some of the nuance in a lot of the different zones. So we had at one time thought maybe we could condense some of these zones, especially with the L and R, some of the ones that are the lower density residential that have very specific situations, they're pretty much legacy zones now anyway. They won't have any new development in them. So those were the ones we were talking about consolidating, and in the end, understanding better the background on them made more sense to leave them alone. So that one I think will still stay as a tabled item.
Jen, can I ask a question? on
Yeah.
this? A couple of these have come up repeatedly as things that we really should tackle, and even if it's not in the purview here, like. One of the overarching comments we've heard is private industry is just not going to develop affordable housing in our county.
Right.
But perhaps there's a way to do that if we have fee reductions, waivers, incentive programs for ADUs. Can those still be carried forward as recommendations to tackle in the future, even if we don't tackle them here?
Absolutely. So the way that we have them in the report is we still have them in the appendix of the report as a recommendation for future to just like capture as a county. We also have a section at the beginning that there's a housing action plan will be kind of the next step. And some of these could be considered as part of that housing action plan as well.
And so it's very clear that we think that some of these things should be tackled. in the
Should
future.
still be tackled. And if we need to make that more clear, we certainly can. We can, state that.
Oh, because the way
Yeah.
I read this in the report was, we're just not really tackling these.
Okay, yeah. No, that's fair.
And-
Absolutely.
And if I may, I think the way that we as a county are gonna be using this. If there are things we have consensus on and we can proceed with, we will be going through this process. To try to get them adopted per that count, right? The things that don't make that cut, it's not like we're just saying, oh, not worth the time, not worth the effort. I think we know, thanks a lot to some of Drea's work. We have resources to do the housing action plan in the next year. And we also are continuing to develop our, again, this goal is not going away. And so what I envision is this can be a reference point for a lot of our future efforts, if we want to pick these things up. One by one, or we can package them together, right? But I think at this point, we're trying to look for a way we can finish this report. Get the things that we do have consensus pulled together and moving ahead. And then we can strategize on how we will pick these other things up as we move through the housing action plan and keep moving as a planning department. So.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. I don't see how we cannot include that one you just brought up in our work, because I mean, we're here to come up with ways to incentivize the construction and or preservation of housing for our employees. And so when we read through this document and there's all this mention of ADUs and where they can be and where they can't be and how big they can be and how tall they can be, I am under the impression that we don't care about free market ADUs. That's not what we're here to discuss. We're here to discuss ADUs, however you either de-restrict them. I think that was a comment you made, Nick, like maybe they don't have to be owned by a worker, but that it needs to be occupied by a worker. So I just don't know how we cannot include that one particular bullet in our conversation. It's like everything in here, in my mind, is about housing for employees, not figuring out ways that people can build bigger or better ADUs on their property. That's not our problem. That's not what we're here to address, right? Am
Absolutely.
I understanding that?
That's a helpful lens to be thinking through this.
I'm gonna piggyback on that. I 100% agree with Laney on this, and not just one. I think there's three in there that we're here, we're momentum. Why are we not capitalizing on this? It's the mission statement and the goals of this exercise. And I think we're just missing the boat if we don't go. So the simple question is, why can't we keep going with those? I don't know if there's a simple answer to that.
The simple answer is we can. And I am happy to continue to convene any member of this group that's still got the stamina to keep meeting. I think what I'm hearing staff say is that we have a chance here to take advantage of the last of Jen's time and get the parts that we think we can complete today to a point where we can present them to the planning commission, present them to the commissioners, and get this big chunk done. And I'm happy to keep going, Nick. And I don't think that there's any reluctance on staff's part to continue to host this meeting. It's a little bit more just matter of what we can finish. I did hear Jen say, if we have time today, let's keep chipping at this list and see what else we can knock off. And it may be that there's some easy answers right in front of us. I don't think anybody in the room would disagree with Elaine's point that we are here to create more deed-restricted ADUs, and we have no interest in spending time trying to figure out how to make free market ADUs easier. Amy.
I think I know I agree with what Laney said, but I also thought we were looking at what's gonna accomplish the most bang for the buck. And if you look at other places regionally, Telluride in particular, that have looked at incentivizing ADUs or getting ADUs rented, it's not working.
True.
So, you know, I don't want to be spinning our wheels for something that might get one unit when we can look at everything else that is much more effective.
Let's do this. Let's agree that everything that's on our screen right now, not part of the current update, is desirable. And if we have time today, we can try to determine which one or two we can knock off this list easily at the end of the day.
And
Let's focus on the things that we know we need to do right now before we get too worried about pre-planning for the future.
but along those lines, I would encourage us to talk about incorporating campers, RVs, and vans.
Okay.
Because
That's
a
Amy's
quick and
Amy's
easy-
suggested priority is
Yeah.
campers and vans. If we get there, let's put that as top of Amy's list and maybe the rest of the groups too. Okay?
Awesome. All right. To kind of set the stage here for today's conversation, we wanted to bring forward the three main zone districts that we've been looking at the most changes on are the LD, MD, and HD, which are low density, high, medium density, and high density. And just a reminder of the first part of the purpose statement for each of those. So we can kind of, I think we as consultants have been grounding ourselves in these purpose statements, looking at them, making sure that they still are applicable. And I think they kind of help set the stage a little bit for some of the recommendations. So the low density district is to provide areas suitable for clustered low density residential. Of course, we all have a different interpretation of what low density could mean. So we've all been working very hard to try to define what that means for San Miguel County. Medium density is to provide areas suitable for clustered medium density residential development. And then high is for clustered mixed use development. In accordance with the East End Master Plan. We have some copies of the zoning kind of in that East End Master Plan area around to use for reference today. We've used those in the past, so that's the area that we're all talking about for more of the medium and high density type development.
Then are any of those zone districts in the West End, or does that second map in this packet show all of the LD approved?
There are, so low density, medium density, and high density are exclusively in the east end.
Thank you, Kay. The zoning and density adjustments. So we have talked early on that all of these zone districts currently have a minimum lot size of 35 acres. So the proposal on the table is when a subdivision comes in any of these zone districts, that we could maybe look at a by right minimum lot size that's smaller, that pairs with that density consideration that we have on the table. So low density, it could be a minimum lot size of 7 acres, which is still very sizable. Medium density could be a minimum lot size of 3 acres where on well and septic. You could reduce down to 6,000 acres if connected to public water and sewer. High density would be 2 acres for well and septic, 3,000 square feet for public water and sewer. And then the Wrights Mesa Town residential, the minimum lot size is currently 5,000 square feet. And the reason for adjusting this is to calibrate it with these medium and high density suggestions. So bringing that down a little bit so that it relates to those as well. And then the primary focus of our conversation today is really this table. So looking at your low, medium, and high density, again, based on that 35 acre lot minimum, currently the allowed by right density is 1 unit per 35 acres. With a PUD, you could be allowed 1 unit per 7 acres in low density, and that's part of how we got to that 7-acre lot minimum on the previous slide. Medium density, 1 unit per 3 acres, again, how we determined the minimum lot size on the previous slide. And then the high density is based on people per acre, which is not a commonly used metric in a lot of land use codes anymore. Some people do still use people per acre, but mostly, most codes are leaning more towards the DUs per acre, density or dwelling units per acre. So where we've moved with this as a proposal is to basically adopt the PUD densities as the by right density. So if we were allowing it by PUD, now it would be allowed as 1 per 7, 1 per 3, and 15 DUs per acre. I'll explain that here in a second, as the by right density. The 15 dwelling units per acre, we've run some calculations on that 40 to 80 people per acre in high density. It actually results in quite a bit more than 15 DUs per acre. But after all of our discussions, looking through some of the exercises we've done in the past on what was acceptable for San Miguel County for high density, we really fell closer to that 15 DU per acre as a by right density. So we've pulled that down actually from what it currently could be allowed in a PUD. Then we started playing around with density bonuses. And I will say some of the density bonuses relate also to multifamily development right now. And Kay, you may have to tell me, I always trip over this. We're required to have 1 in 3 units to be affordable or workforce housing, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. If you're
Okay.
building multifamily, the employee housing mitigation requirements are deemed strict, 1 out of every 3.
Perfect. So as we started to build in this density bonus concept, we started somewhat in that range because we figured we needed to, if we're already requiring 1 unit in every 3, that's 30% to be deed restricted, then the incentive would need to start to step up from there, correct? So we do recognize, I will point out in this slide, we started to play around with density bonuses of if you're providing, I should have my notes in front of me, 30%, I think it's 37%, 35%, or more. We're trying to get above that 30% number of 1 per 3, right? So that's where this 25% bonus comes in, is if you've done more than that. The 35% bonus comes in the next step, and then a 50% bonus at the final step. We realize those are all very close together, those tiers. We did a lot of thinking on this, and we thought, do we need to condense those tiers? Do we put it out to the group? So I would say one of the things I want you guys to think about today as you're discussing this, are those tiers at the right place? Do we just need 2 tiers? Do we need a different tier in there that would be a very low incentive for maybe a higher AMI? Because I think we're tying this to the AMI from the I was going to call it the affordable priority housing review metrics. So if we need to have another step in there, we all have talked a lot about this, that we've got kind of that quote unquote affordable living AMIs, but there's a huge gap between that and what is typically market rate in this county, right? Do we need to capture something in the middle? It's something that we haven't really rolled into this, but I think listening to some of the comments that came in, I'm just wondering, I'm just kind of throwing that out on the table as a consideration. Because the more we look into other communities and how they do density bonuses, this tiered system of percentages seems to be the most effective. But we can tier that based on different AMIs as well, is what I'm trying to say.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The proposed density column is just providing more density, but with no additional requirement to provide affordable housing to anybody.
Correct.
So I don't even know why we would do that.
And that's
my sticking point. Big
Yep.
time.
Why are we even doing that? Why don't we just jump right over to the one that leave it the way it is, and there's only an incentive if you're providing housing to people.
Right, and I think that's a super fair point, but let's talk about that when we have our conversation.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Because
I just want to
think-
clarify,
I
because
guess
I
we're
was,
pretty passionate about that
Yeah,
one, so.
no, I
I'm
know there's
jumping
a lot
in
of
now.
passion about that one, so I'm really kind of excited to see how that plays out in the conversations.
That proposed density by right would allow for a minor subdivision and would allow for more missing middle houses. That might not be deed restricted, but would be smaller, therefore less valuable, on smaller lots, less valuable. So maybe more potential for minimum market purchase. But I had a question, okay, let's see, the low densities. Zone district, are there any areas left that haven't already been subdivided?
So right now, in order to rezone any of these for low, medium and high. Remember the old 89 plan was very compact. And everything that could be rezoned is pretty much done. There's a little bit out there, but everything is pretty much done. And it also says you can only rezone land that is, already zoned PUDR, which is non-existent. So the first thing we have to do is strip out that PUD requirement and that PUDR requirement. When we did the East End master plan and expanded the area, we created more areas that could be low, medium, or high density. So there is an opportunity for rezones in the future under what the master plan set out.
Yeah, my concern was that I didn't want to spend cycles deciding what could be done within a low density property if it's inside a subdivision. Unless we're prepared to go there, and I'm not sure we are. So that was my question.
Yeah, and definitely as I've been reviewing this, my input has been, let's not bother with this zone district because there's no capacity and there's no bang for the buck. Whereas this zone district, there is capacity.
I see Tony Dariani's hand is up. Mr. Dariani, go ahead and unmute
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
loud and clear.
Okay, I don't know if we've opened the discussion on this item or not, but I agree with Lainey and Nick, and I'm pretty passionate about it. We're tasked with creating incentives for new housing, new affordable housing. We're not tasked with this broad brush upzoning where we're going to allow what was previously, for instance, a 1 per 35 to go to a 1 per 7 by right. I think that's beyond the scope of what we were tasked to do. So I'm echoing what some of the concerns are.
Thank you, Tony. I'll go to Haley. Hallie, it is. And a bad one, sorry.
Not that I disagree with you at all, Tony. I think I'm aligned with you if I look at my own notes here, but what I'm seeing, and I think what Jen said, is that the reason that this is now a use by right recommendation is simply because our other goal is to get rid of the PUD process as much as possible. So these use by right numbers are exactly what we would allow through a PUD. I'm not saying that's where we should land, but those numbers are the same. So that's why we're seeing them.
Yeah, and it doesn't eliminate if there's a subdivision or building multifamily, it doesn't eliminate the requirement to deed restrict 1 out of every 3 lots or units. That's still in there and we're not touching that one right now. Amy had a question for me.
What's the difference between low density and low density residential?
Low density residential is a specialty zone district that was created specifically for 2 PUDs,
Okay.
Mill Creek and Deep Creek. So that one's not being touched because it's a PUD.
And I pulled up my notes now to go back to the percentages that are tied to these. So development with 37% of the total units being deed restricted qualify for that 25% bonus. 38 to 50% would qualify for the 35% bonus. And that's the one I think we need to talk about is that, do we need those two or could we just combine them into one? And then 51% and more would qualify for the 50% and potentially a 10-foot height increase for multifamily. So just wanted to put that back out there because I was kind of vague when I presented that the first time.
With any of these, you can go lower than what, yeah, so, okay.
Yeah, these are
That
the
helps.
high end, these are the maximum ranges.
Got it.
Oh,
Just one clarifying question or confusing question for me. So going back to the 35 acres, and we only want to develop 2 acres as a subdivision within that 35. Are we still talking about, and the rest is going to be open space? How does that play out? And maybe
That's a great question. So these are average densities, so you could do, I have to think some quick math here. Instead of doing 1 unit on that 35 acres plus an ADU, if you wanted to do 2, you could under this new requirement, because it's 1 unit per 7 acres maximum overall density. That doesn't mean they have to be 7-acre parcels.
Right, so on the 31, if you've got a 35-acre parcel and it's 1 dwelling unit per 7 acres, you could hypothetically divide it into 5, 7-acre parcels. Or you could have, 4 1-acre parcels and 1 31-acre parcel. Or you could even have an open space parcel that's separate from it. That doesn't count towards density because it wouldn't have development rights on it.
but if I had 35 acres and I wanted to carve out 2 acres for 30 units. So we were talking about 15 units per acre, I think, or 12.
Oh, for the high density?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're all they're all
They're all-
affordable.
yeah,
They're all 100%.
In that hypothetical example, what's it presently zoned? What is
Yeah.
the present, what is the present zoning?
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand, and it's not, and it's a little bit off track, but. Essentially, if you have a parcel of land, and much of it is not gonna get developed. It's gonna be open space or access or whatever. And really, when you're building affordable housing, you're trying to maximize the density. Like 15 units per acre, so you're only gonna develop a couple acres. How does that translate from this formula? You're trying to get us, a minor subdivision done.
Yeah.
It's almost like we need another
Subdivide that
column
for
for
yourself.
100%.
Yeah,
We need another column for 100% affordable. This is for, affordable people.
Yeah.
Our workforce.
there's, and, so what you're asking, there's a lot of different ways to design a project. If you're allowed 15 dwelling units per acre times 35, you could do that many. Or you could, choose to only develop part of it, and, there's a lot of different options what you could do with the rest.
But I think, I guess what I'm getting at, the reality with affordable housing is you're trying to,
Yeah,
frankly, minimize your footprint.
yes,
So if it's a 35-acre parcel or 70-acre parcel, you're still only gonna do 2 acres.
mhm.
And the rest of it's gonna get turned over to open space or it's whatever. I'm just not sure how this all translates to that practical approach.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is if you've got a high density property and you choose to, go the density bonus route and go 22.5 dwelling units per acre, you develop however many acres you want to.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that there's no density left on the part that you didn't develop. The scenario I gave you for low density, where, instead of doing 7 5-acre parcels, you did a number of 6 1-acre parcels and 1 big parcel, or 7 1-acre parcels and 1 open space parcel. That's pretty finite. But if you choose to only develop 2 acres of your 35 acres right now, that remaining 33 acres still has development rights in that scenario.
I know that there are some concerns about how it exists currently, but it seems to me, Paul, that the community housing zone district might be a path for you to do that level of density. especially when we get through tinkering with it.
I'm sorry, what was?
The community housing zone district, if you were to subdivide the property and rezone your 2 acres as CHCD, you'd have a fair amount of density to work with.
So that's another option we haven't got.
It is, we're not talking about that.
It's another
Yeah.
column.
Right.
I think I'm hearing this wrong, but I'm not sure. So for Paul's example with low density at the maximum density bonus, I could build 1 density unit per 5 acres for easy math. Does that mean I can put 7 houses on 1 acre of my 35 acres and call it good?
Let's see.
I think
Because-
so, because if we've got multifamily in there, well,
Let me extrapolate that, because then if I go to high density, that means I can put 788 houses on 1 acre. And that's nuts.
And that's where the minimum lot size on the previous slide would come in. So we need to calibrate the minimum lot size to the densities so that we aren't ever going too
Yeah.
small
And,
for the number.
and that's why I wanted to take a step back,
There's-
because Paul, your hypothetical question of how do we do it? You first got to start with what your property is zoned as presently. I mean, that's where it all starts. So let's say your property 35 acres zoned forest ag. The first step is rezoning. And whether it's to lease adjustment at CH, to LD, or to HD, then determines what you can do on the entirety of that property. And Holly's math, I believe, is 100% correct. If you rezone to LD, you can do 7 units on that 35 acres, and you don't have to subdivide at all. You can scatter them around or put them all clustered together. Yes, there's standards you have to live up to and go through. If you rezone to HD or to CH, you're in the 700s for your numbers.
It's a lot of units.
Yeah.
So how do we protect against the 800 units per acre part? You said we go back to the,
it wouldn't be 800 units per acre.
well, on the 1 acre.
On so where it comes in is all the various development standards we have. So we have setbacks, we have height, we have parking. All of those other factors come in. They've got to make it work. So although hypothetically they could put, all 800 acres on a pinpoint, the reality is it's not going to fit.
But Holly, you're on the sticking point to what, again, I'm going to say that I was so vocal and why there was so much backlash on the CH zone is that was such high density by right. And so then you're just reliant on the things that Kay's mentioning to do it, and which, are kind of subjective at some point. So it's a double-edged sword. It's dangerous, and that's what we're here to kind of find the balance.
But it's exactly what some people in this commission have really supported, the clustered density, even within low density, as opposed to a house every 7 acres. So it also might be perfect. Hard to say.
Yeah, that's
Right. All right. We can keep going with this conversation here in a minute. Let's get through a few more slides. This is one that we checked off the list at our last meeting. Remember, there were 2 items that we all said, yes, this is great. Let's, no more discussion on. We did want to just throw it in for context, and it's exactly on what Kay just was talking about with those setbacks, that we talked about adjusting setbacks slightly in all the zone districts. They're still very generous setbacks, I will say. And so I think it still protects a lot of the structures. One of the other items that we had on the list, and I think this also goes to a little bit of the conversation we've been having, is allowing multiple dwelling units on large lots. Looking at maybe expanding caretaker ADU or secondary units on those larger 35 acres to allow up to 2 additional secondary what's the other word? I found a solution to our problem. We have
Sleeves.
ADU, secondary, and caretaker. We've kind of gone back and forth on, do we just call them all one thing or not? So they're in the code right now as 3 different things, but we kind of wanted to capture them under one title. And I was thinking it could just be subordinate units if we wanted to keep the 3 types. I mean, that brings one more.
Appropriate.
But, so we'll for the rest of this conversation, just kind of capture all of them as subordinate units. So looking at, do we want to allow 2 of those on each parcel? And then there can be deed restrictions associated or not, so that's kind of the conversation. Community housing, we have proposed some slight adjustments to. I think when we first started this project, at least for my part, my initial thought was get rid of it. And then after the conversations, we've kind of gone to, let's just tweak it. And I think I had a heavier handed tweak at one point, and we've kind of lightened up. So what you see in the packet is revising that purpose statement to better reflect priorities, community priorities. Allowing co-housing units like we have in all the other zone districts that are similar. And then the one piece that I think kind of caught a lot of us was the height bonus in the code currently is tied to green building or net zero building. And one thing we had talked about a long time ago was that could be a place where we switch that a little bit. It's still encourage the net zero or green building, but change that script a little bit to be applied to only the more deeply affordable housing, because that's what we're trying to do here today.
Yeah, Tony, go ahead.
Yes, sorry. Can we just go back to the slide on ADU? I just want to make sure we're clear. This only applies under the accelerated review, right? Under fast track. We're not saying we're going to allow, I mean, we've seen that this kind of ADU option isn't really working, but it might work if we're offering these incentives, right? So this would only be under fast track. Is that correct? Accelerated review.
No, fast track is a totally optional process. The developer or builder owner does not have to use fast track. They can ask for it if they want. But no actual development makes fast track mandatory. And fast track doesn't make any activity mandatory either, going both ways.
So how
It's
are
just
we
that,
incentivizing that these ADUs actually get used for workforce housing?
okay, so right now in the F zone, you can have your primary dwelling plus you can have a caretaker unit, which is up to 2,000 square feet. We noticed that domestic well permits, so those are issued to properties that are 35 acres and larger, they always say they are allowed to be used for 3 dwelling units. So our idea, and I verified this with our water commissioner, would be to allow a 3rd dwelling unit, another caretaker unit, provided that 2nd caretaker unit is deed restricted. And caretaker units are all approved by administrative review. They don't need to go to a hearing. So is that part making sense now?
I think so. I just want to make sure we're focused on increasing
Yeah.
the pool of workforce housing.
Yeah. So the only way they could get that 2nd caretaker unit would be to deed restrict it. That's the only way they can get it.
And is that
That's what
true, for
bullet.
instance, for the 3rd bullet for Wilson Mesa?
So,
Just as
okay.
an example, I'm trying to apply it practically.
Yeah, so on Wrights Mesa, right now it says that you can have a secondary unit, which is largely a caretaker unit, but they decided to give it a different name. On
Yeah.
parcels that are 5 acres or larger on Wrights Mesa Rural Agriculture Zone. And so what we're saying is, again, if they've got the water, and it could be Norwood water, and Norwood will serve, or it's a well that allows 3 dwelling units, then they could do a 2nd secondary unit and deed restrict it for housing. And the one thing is we'd have to come with a new deed restriction for the Wrights Mesa zone because that's not the R1 school district.
So to risk going back to that untouchables list slide, is it working? If we deed restrict a 2nd unit, does it just sit empty?
No, the deed restriction would mandate how long it has to be occupied and also limit how long it can be vacant.
Or else what? Do we have an enforcement mechanism?
Yeah.
Which is what?
Someone who's read a deed restrictions in more recent than me. There are a lot of remedies. There are fines, and then if it's not corrected, and the fines aren't insubstantial. If the fines don't work, then there are remedies that the housing authority can take.
So we feel like it's enforceable to have deed restricted dwelling units.
Absolutely.
Somebody has to identify that it's not meeting.
Yeah, well, so, we have those ancient ADU deed restrictions that nobody was ever monitoring. All of those are now being monitored, and all new deed restrictions going forward are monitored.
By the housing authority?
Yes, and so they have regular checks where the owner has to verify who's occupying it, making sure that it's a qualified employee under the deed restriction requirements, and that the lease is for the minimum period that it's supposed to be.
Kay, do those deed restrictions, those ADU deed restrictions, dictate what they can charge for the units?
We have not gone that route, but like I said, we're gonna have to create some new deed restrictions, and they might be tied to AMI. We haven't got that far yet.
But if they have to be occupied, then they have to charge a market rate in order to get it occupied. It might still be at the high end of the market, but if it has to be occupied by someone in the district, and you just can't charge $1 million, so.
Yeah, at some point, incentives need to be addressed, because like, who would do that? I'm gonna spend $500,000 to build this ADU on my property, and I have to have somebody in there, and I can only charge X, and
Still has to work.
yeah.
But I mean, that's math, it's
Yeah.
driven, and will change year by year.
Jared.
And ultimately, I think that the tool that has existed today to try to get that built has been a ability to avoid a employee housing mitigation fee.
Yeah, but you
Now-
already have a house. You're not gonna pay any housing mitigation fee. Why would anyone do that?
Yeah.
That's the
Well,
question.
if they're building new or they're doing an addition to their existing house, they would have
Oh,
to pay the
while
employee
they're
housing-
building.
Yeah.
And so again, I think it may be a
Yeah.
relatively ineffective tool today, but that tool does exist. And if we need to refine that tool, as we've all talked about, again, these things may work together. I think Jed put some of that into the report.
Yeah.
A lot of these end up kind of merging, but as of today, and I look over at John Huebner, since we adjusted the employee housing mitigation fee, this has been available for new builds to deed restrict by building an ADU, and nobody's done it, right? And so that's been one of the things we've been thinking a lot about
Mhm.
is that incentive still not enough, right?
So here's the question there. If I'm building a new 10,000 square foot house and a deed restricted secondary unit that's say 2,000 square feet, does my housing mitigation fee get wiped out only for 2,000 square feet, or is it wiped out entirely for my entire bill?
So
There's
an
cap-
8,900 square foot house has a mitigation requirement that is equivalent to a 1,998 square foot dwelling unit. So if they go over that 8,900 square feet, they would still have to pay some fee, but the fee equivalent to that 2,000 square feet would be removed.
It's a sliding scale, both on the size of the primary unit and the secondary.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the cost to develop an ADU probably doesn't offset the savings of the organization.
That's what I've heard from others. So it might be something that needs to be, to really incentivize it.
And it can be your own employee. These, people have gotten away from having an on-site caretaker. And this could be an incentive to bring that back. So there is a benefit to them. And, did we write in, flexibility on the distance from the main house on that?
We did.
Because that's another thing that people ask us a lot. Well, can I have it farther? I want it farther away from my house. Because I don't want people living that close to me. So we said, if you will do this, then you can also put it farther away. And do I expect that we will suddenly get, 100 of these? No. But based on questions that we've gotten from people over the years, we might get some. And I think it's worth it. The possibility is out there. And since water is one of our biggest hurdles to creating housing, the fact that there is this possibility is something that I felt like we shouldn't leave it, just discard the idea.
Yeah, I know that that's touchable here. I know that that's on the touchable list. We aren't going to talk about it, but I think exactly what you guys are saying is the reason that no one's building more is because there's no incentive to do it. Because it's the same cost to either just pay the cash or build the house. And if you're required to rent it to someone, why would you do that? So you would just pay the cash. So there's no incentive to do it. And that's what we need to do is, yes, I know it's on the untouchable list, but that needs to be corrected to where there's an incentive to build an ADU, especially if you're required to rent it to someone else, because why would you do that?
You mean adjustments in the mitigation fee?
Exactly,
Yeah,
mitigation.
yeah.
Hey, Dan, as someone who had raised the mitigation fee and received the heat for doing so, I'm sure you noticed there were full-page ads, there were letters from every broker in town, and that pressure remains. If you are suggesting incentivizing by raising the impact mitigation fee even higher, that's going to be an uphill battle. If there's straight up incentives by the county taking cash out of its pocket from somewhere else, it's going to take a really big number to make a difference. If you're wealthy enough to build 10,000 square feet private home in this county, your bank book and your pocketbook are big enough that it's going to take a really big number to make your eyes light up and make you want to take action.
So I'll clarify what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm not saying that by any means to raise the mitigation fee. What I'm saying is that if you have $1 million mitigation fee, let's say it's roughly 1,000. Okay. So you're building 1,000 square feet. Okay. So, and it's $1 million mitigation fee, and that's going to offset it 100%. Why would you build that ADU? So my point is that the tool needs to be recalculated to where you either pay the $1 million or you can maybe you actually end up you can build an ADU for 500 square feet and you actually save money by doing that, but we get it for does that make sense? So I think
You're saying decouple the square footage if they build an ADU or secondary, some sort of secondary unit, but not necessarily the big one.
correct. So you can
That's the part I didn't hear, but that makes sense.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's incentivize the building of affordable housing is not only are you gaining land, you're gaining water, to your point, but on top of it, they're building an ADU, it's gonna save them money. We get an ADU. That's deed restricted, that's required to be rented. Why not?
Glad you're here, Dan. Lee.
I don't want to set the realtor community hair on fire or anything here, but maybe we're missing an opportunity as we refine these tools to also catch new owners at the point of resale with an incentive offer that, hey, you bought this property, if you'll add an ADU, we'll take a few points off your real estate transfer tax.
Amy.
At the risk of kind of taking this even further, there's one other thing going on in this discussion on ADUs that I don't understand, and that has to do with the federal tax code. And how some of these units get classified. Yeah, because I talked with somebody I know who's got an ADU, and I asked them why they're not renting it. And they said they were interested in doing it as far as taking care of the affordable housing problem. But then when they talked with their accountant, they said they couldn't do it. So somebody who's more of an expert on federal tax law maybe needs to dig into that a little bit more, because I think there's another barrier that's going. Yeah,
That's an interesting one.
yeah.
Could be.
Actually,
an
I might be able to shed a little light.
Is it like a
Just
second home?
Just conceptually, because most second homes are
Vacation.
classified as investment properties.
Yeah,
And therefore they're counting chickens every day when it comes to capital gains tax.
Oh.
So their basis is set when they purchase the property, expenses that they incur against the property decrease the basis, income increase. So,
an
or I'm
income,
sorry,
yeah.
I said that reverse.
okay.
Right.
But in the end, you know, these folks are really thinking very differently than those of us
Yeah.
that live here in our homes. They're thinking, what am I gonna get dinged with when I sell the house? And good luck changing that tax code. We gotta do something radical to
Okay.
do that.
But that is another barrier.
It's not that they can't, it's that it's not the best financial decision for them.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess, the final thing here for me, at least, I hope, is we have had people asking us about this. Why can't I or could I? So there's definitely interest. The fact that nobody's done it yet, I think is not a reason to at least not make it possible.
Mhm. Mhm.
I would agree with Kay. I hear the tax implications. I had not thought of that, but it makes perfect sense because we're not in that income bracket where we have to think that way. However, there may be some civic-minded folks who are willing to take a tax hit in order to help solve a problem. And to close the door on that seems foolish.
I agree.
Okay. Can we maybe as a group agree that this slide, we can give it a thumbs up and take it off our list of worries for today? Can we do a SSR formal vote, which is how we make recommendations? All those in favor of this slide being approved, I see Nina Kotke gave us one vote. Hands up, please.
With changing the name. of the-
Okay, what are we changing? Then
Yeah, and
Okay.
it doesn't say anything about, that the second ADU would be deed restricted. That would be my only
Okay,
concern
so
about
let's
this.
make sure we capture that.
It's in the.
It's in the document, it's just not in the summary.
But I
Okay.
think you can mention to circle backs.
Okay,
Yeah.
we have a half a vote. Is there anyone opposed to the concept as outlined in the slide? With the knowledge that we're going to make sure the language captures that the second bonus unit must be deed restricted. And language does show up in the tables. Nick,
It's not an opposition. I'm fully in support, but I think there should be an asterisk next to that deed restricted, which says that a deep dive into deed restrictions need to be done so that we can actually not make them punitive. So that it becomes something that again facilitates rather than discourages. So I know it's a separate committee, a separate discussion, but a little asterisk next to the deed restriction because it's
fair, but
necessary.
the nature of the word restriction indicates some form of punishment.
Yeah.
So it's going to be tighter than you get a free house.
Yeah, deed guidance.
All right, I think we solved one.
Yay.
Okay, well done, gang. Thank you.
Radar, little win too. Okay, we already talked about this one. This is another one that, we have a pretty large table in the code. Or sorry, I back up one, Jen. This is the household definitions that we all approved updating in our last meeting. So, I just wanted to throw it in for context again that we separated out, but I do want to hit on one because I think there was one comment in the draft why we're separating out townhomes specifically. Currently, they are coupled with the multifamily housing, which is more of I always think of it as a structure with multiple units within it, above and side by side. Townhomes or single family attached are exactly what they look. They're like the row homes where they're on individual lots. They're attached to each other, but you own the parcel and the building. So it just seems more necessary to uncouple those. So that's why we separated those.
I understand that from a perspective of a developer, because that's
Sure.
100% relevant. It's how you sell and take title to a property. Why does it matter for what we're doing?
Because it comes down to the units and the density. And the setbacks. And all of the above. Cause a single family or a single household dwelling detached on its own lot is one thing. If you're attaching several units, you could end up with, you know, a row of 10 units without any separation if you don't put regulations in place to have like 4 units and a separation of 4 units or.
So zero lot lines.
Zero lot lines.
Then potential zero setback.
Between them, yes, yes.
Okay, so that's incorporated, zero lot lines and zero setbacks.
There are still front and rear setbacks
Yeah,
and there'd be
right.
side setbacks on the
Right.
units,
Yeah,
but yeah,
if you have a quad,
yeah,
Mhm.
and that's allowed.
Yeah.
right.
I'm still not getting the difference between, and let's just use an example, a 7-unit condominium complex, which would be under a different definition that you guys have, and a 7-unit townhome project, which would be under a different definition. 7 units is 7 units, it's all attached.
Yeah, townhomes are attached side by
Yeah.
side. They would take up more land than a 7-unit condo that could be stacked, because now you're stacking those units potentially side by side and up and
So you're
down.
taking into account, the definition is being shaped by mass and scale.
Yes,
But I also think
I'm
it's
sure.
the legal structure, right?
right.
This is the condo.
Understood, but that's again, that's for title and sale, that's not for just getting a unit, you know, and relaxing a standard. I
Yeah,
mean, I understand the mass and scale that a townhome will take up more mass than a 7-unit condo project will take up more mass than a 7-unit condo project, townhome versus condo.
Right.
That makes sense, and that could affect setbacks and others. Not sure that I mean, again, I'm just going back in all the experience I have of building townhomes versus condos. I'm not sure it's significant enough to be confusing in a land use code, but I'm not gonna fight it.
yeah, it's very, very, very unusual. In fact, I think over the hundreds of land use codes that I've worked on, I have never seen a townhome mixed with a multifamily like you guys have. They're always separated out. Now duplexes, townhomes, single family gets muddled a lot, and you guys have already solved that with the duplex being a separate type of unit than single family attached. So,
We're talking about setbacks and we kind of blasted over that
Sure.
one thing. Is there anything that we're talking about that kind of conflicts with what the state wants jurisdictions to do about wildfire? I just want to make sure we're not creating another.
wildfire,
Yeah.
Welfare.
Yeah, we don't expect that, because it all comes down to the construction.
Okay.
And maintaining the specific zones and what materials you're using and things like that. So, yeah, we
We don't
don't,
have to worry about.
yes,
No.
Okay.
yeah, we don't anticipate a
and,
problem.
and those setbacks, I will just go back to them really quick to show you a visual. The smallest setback most fire departments will allow is 10 feet between the buildings, so a 5-foot setback, yeah, for that access, and you can see here, we're well above that, we're, 15-foot. Well, let's see my side, your side, 15 or 12.5-foot side, you're still,
Okay.
well above that.
I just wouldn't want to spend a lot of time on this.
Right.
All of a sudden.
No, I mean, it's probably very front of mind right now with what's going on around us.
Since you got that slide up, is there any reason not to go to a 10-foot?
We went with the 12.5 because that's what's in the current zone. I asked that myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because affordable housing is all about density, using the land effectively. It's current. 10-foot setback works. That's how most subdivisions are done. They're trying to get, so just a practical aspect, it needs some minimum sort of fire. Fire departments, they want 50-foot setbacks.
Right.
And
Paul, are you talking about which zone district HD?
The medium and high
Yeah,
are 12.5 side right now, and that's because that's what is allowed by a PUD currently, I believe, in those zones.
Yeah, we just carried over what was in there, but I can't think of any reason why it couldn't be 10.
So to Paul's point, I mean, why wouldn't we have an incentive on this, just like we would have an incentive on everything that we're talking about? So if you do deed restricted, then you get a smaller setback.
You get a solid
If
strong
you
setback.
don't, then you have a larger setback. So why wouldn't we have an incentive here as opposed to doing that?
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump in on that, is that the incentives should only apply to affordable housing,
Yeah.
not to free market
Right.
unilaterally.
Yeah.
That's the overarching comment. I would just throw out as a little bit of a beg to differ would be just increasing the housing supply will also help increase housing. So that could be an argument for something like this, just keeping the land sort of simple, saying, just let the setbacks run on their own and not have that carried out there because it's just a setback.
Yeah. And setbacks are probably the one thing in our code that are most closely tied to building code. So I think it's cleaner to not have different setbacks for, you know, based on their owner and occupancy status, deed restricted or not deed restricted. So setbacks, like I said, I don't have problems taking that side setback for medium and low or high down to 10 feet. I don't see any conflict there. But I really don't think we want to be getting into different setbacks for based on ownership type or occupancy type.
What I hear you saying, Kay, is that Dan's suggestion is going to be difficult to implement, and that Paul's suggestion of 10 feet is doable and you see no reason not to.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a worthwhile time to pull the group and see if we'd like to go to 10-foot setbacks in the medium and high density zone.
Yes.
Yes from Amy, yes from Lee. Hands up if that's something.
For 10 foot.
Correct. 10-foot setback, hands up. We're voting. You don't know. You can abstain. Okay, we got hands up for 10-foot setbacks.
I just
12 and a
have,
half.
I just have issue with it because of what Danny said. I mean, this is why we're here,
Okay,
to create incentives for affordable housing. That's why we're here.
okay.
And so if we can, if a 10-foot setback makes it easier for somebody building affordable housing, then I'm all for it. It's just by giving it to everybody, we're not creating an incentive. And, you know, I get it, just maybe providing more housing is providing more housing, but we know this market and we know that providing another very expensive house just requires more people to serve that family. And that is counterintuitive to what we're trying to do here. So, I mean, if it can't be done and it's too complicated, I totally get it. I just feel like it should be said that we're here to come up with incentives for de-restricted housing.
And in this case, you know, what we're, you know, with the low, medium and high density, we're trying to get rid of the PUD hurdle. If we're going to get rid of this, right now it says, if you're not a PUD and you're at 35 acres, you have this, but if you're a PUD, then you do this. If we do away with the PUD requirement, then what are we doing with the standards? Because it's just kind of a cascading related amendment to something that's supposed to be solving a bigger problem. It's an, oh, by the way, almost.
So I guess to summarize that too, you can already do these setbacks for market rate housing via a PUD. Just to put that into context, I'm not.
Dan,
The difference with that is a PUD is gonna require the 5 steps. You're gonna have a lot of
Correct.
public opinion.
Correct.
Potentially you could have some pushback, you potentially could change something. This is just gonna go.
By right.
So that's the big difference. It's like,
Yeah.
yes, you're right. It would be allowed with a PUD if everyone's agreeing upon it, but if the community or the neighbors or the people don't agree on it.
Yeah.
Then
It's still.
it potentially might. not.
And
So.
it's not totally, yeah, there's still process. So if it's a major subdivision, it's gonna be the 5-step process. Assuming that, you know, if they're only creating 4 lots and they're done, and we adopt, you know, the minor subdivision, which is a totally different question. Yeah, it could be by right that they could do it on 4 lots. And then multifamily, where do we have multifamily in these? Are they by right or are they 1 step? Yeah, so,
They're not by right.
yeah, I think there's a process in there for multifamily.
Jared,
I was just gonna mention, this is something that I've wrestled with in all of our housing discussion, right? Because it's when the state has made rules regarding housing, when we look at planning practices that are adopted nationwide, right? These are a lot of the things that Jen is bringing to the table, is best practices on affordable housing development. And when they say affordable housing outside of this valley and this county, developing housing period is a development of affordable housing, right? So something I have struggled with, and I think this group struggles with, and rightfully so, is housing development contributory to affordable housing? And my economics class in college would say yes, right? But I think all of our anecdotal experiences are our market is so wacky, it is not, right? And so that, I think that's one of our struggles. We're trying to apply all of these practices that are kind of best practice to try and get affordable housing developed. Some of those are coming from rules from the state, some of those are coming from us looking at neighbors. And we're trying to find that balance. And, from what I'm hearing, and I had it in my notes 3 days ago, right? Our inherent tension here is, does this fit for our wonky market, right? Do we just bypass doing anything for market rate housing, just standard code provisions? And just say, all of this has to drive through an affordable housing methodology. And I think that's an active question that we've got to get to.
I'm gonna answer that from two perspectives. One, my own, the answer is unequivocally yes. That if you build free market, you exacerbate the problem, you don't solve the problem. The second is from the county's perspective. You guys have impact fees that say the exact same thing. Is that if you build, according to impact fees, if you build somewhere between 3,500 and 4,000 square foot house, it causes the impact of one affordable unit. That's 1-to-1. So what are we just going to keep building 1-to-1-to-1 for the next 40 years and have the same committee meet again in 40 years? We got to try something new.
Lee and then Amy.
Okay, you can correct me on this. I was really curious as I was reading through this. I was trying to remember, what exactly is the PUD trigger? When does a project cross the line? So I went back and looked, and if I'm right, the enabling language simply says, if you apply for a development of more density than the location and its zoning allows, then you have to do a PUD.
Yeah,
Is that
there's
correct?
different categories in the zone districts, so if you're looking at the draft. There's uses by right, there's uses allowed by administrative review, which has a little more criteria to it, but
Right.
similar to these. Then we have uses allowed subject to one-step review, which is usually the planning commission. Uses allowed subject to two-step, which goes to the planning commission and the VOCC, and these both have full community notice, opportunities to comment. And then it says, and these uses require a PUD. So each zone district, some zone districts don't have any PUD uses. They're simply stopped at the two-step. So you look to the code, what's the intensity, what's the use, that you want to propose, and that's when you go into the PUD. And one thing we've got, for example, if you look at the high density zone, it's just on that page. So the PUD is really getting into the more high intensity activities. It's what's going to make it mixed use. So the tourist foundation, commercial uses, conference facilities, office and financial institutions, schools and hospitals. Those are the PUDs. Two-step, we've got everywhere in the code. We have the single family larger than 12,000 square feet. Duplexes greater than on parcels greater than 5 acres. Multi-household residence, rooming houses, co-housing, cottage housing,
alternative living spaces, which is RVs and tiny homes, churches and fire stations. So, you know, that's kind of the line just in that one as proposed between the, by right or
Right.
by two-step and by PUD.
Right. Just to close on my point, there's expression all through the materials about the concern of developers and funders and people who do the work at the more onerous processes. And I guess what I'm trying to do is reduce the perception that a PUD is anything other than an exception way out on the end of what we say is permissible. So I wouldn't want us to set the PUD's 5-step as the typical or likely process for a development application, because it's not, it's out there. And I don't know that we're ever going to have another one when they finish with Society Turn.
Amy,
Okay, back to the 10-foot setback. If it's an incentive for somebody to develop more affordably, I think we should allow it. I don't think it's going to be an incentive for somebody to develop not affordably. I mean, if you look at the high-end market, they don't care about setbacks.
One thing that was noted in the report that's really driving this, that we haven't really brought up today, is that the East End Master Plan recommended this, recommended an action to establish flexible front setbacks, encourage multi-family and mixed-use and commercial development, to create strong interaction with the street edge and support walkability. And so this is as much a reaction to the findings of the East End Master Plan as it is about, you know, reducing reliance on PUDs and encouraging affordable housing. This piece came out of the East End Master Plan. Now, does that mean that we want the low density to go from 50 to 25? Maybe not, it's low density, probably not like walking from your house to the bakery. But certainly in high density, it seems to me that reducing that 30-foot setback makes perfect sense. It's high density. Why would it have a 30-foot setback?
so that put us back to the original question of should we go from 12.5 to 10 in
Yes.
medium and low and high density setbacks?
Yes.
Hands up, please. 1, 3, 2, Hannah, 3, Amy, 4, Paul. Folks on Zoom, if you care to send a thumb up, there's one from Tony. Thank you. And Nina, if you don't care to vote, then we'll ask for all those opposed. Nina's a yes.
It's a trick question.
Yeah.
Is this for affordable housing or is this unilateral?
Unilateral. It's
I'm
unilateral.
opposed.
Okay,
Yeah,
2 opposed, 3 opposed. Okay,
As a planner, I'm not wild about having a different setback between affordable and height works for that. But setbacks, I don't think it achieves. I don't think it gives up anything. And it actually makes it a little more difficult for, you know, planners to figure out what's going on.
It also will encourage the clustering concept that's in all of those purpose statements. Just as another, I'm not pro or con, I'm just throwing out other thoughts to consider.
I think we're very close to the supermajority that we're required to get. I do acknowledge what Jared and Nick and Elaine have all been touching on, and I think we all share that reluctance to continue to build free market housing and only exacerbate the need for deed restricted housing. And I don't know yet how we're going to provide those incentives that make it so desirable to build deed restricted and so hard, if you will, to build free market. But that feels like where we are really hung up.
Okay. Let's see.
Can I ask a question before we move on?
Yeah.
What about all the other zones, like Wilson, Wrights Mesa, rural residential, and then Wrights Mesa TR? Are we happy with them? Do they have setback?
We're leaving those alone, especially the Wrights Mesa Town residential. That one is closely tied to Town Norwood. And when that was created, it was aligned. It actually encouraged annexation in Norwood, so that's why we're not working on that one at this point.
So that doesn't have 50-foot setbacks?
No, I think they're closer to these. I'd have to pull the code up to verify that, but they were much closer to these.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
met Town Norwood setbacks.
Yeah. In fact, they might even be smaller, than some of these.
Because at the time they were adopted, they were aligned with the town of Norwood because we wanted to facilitate annexation. That's why we don't want to create development that is a hindrance to annex into Norwood because the setbacks are. And then the Wrights Mesa, same with Wrights Mesa rural residential.
Everyone use the
sorry.
microphones.
Yeah. Having to share. It got a little behind me. So we were aligning, that's why we're not, doing anything in those zones, is we were aligning already with what's going on with the town of Norwood, their plans, their zoning.
Perfect.
Jen, before we proceed, I'm going to ask a procedural question of the group. We are about halfway through our 3 hours.
In my mind.
If this is a good stopping point, maybe we take a 5-minute recess and there's bathrooms on the second floor and the third floor, or vice versa. And we come back promptly by 10:35 and continue this conversation. Is that useful for everybody?
Good.
Okay, we're going to take 5 and let's be back before 10:35. to throw the plan to divide into groups out the window. Partially because that's going to take more time, but mostly because I'm finding that this whole group conversation is really useful, and that I fear if we split up, we're only going to want to hear what everyone else is saying. So we might as well stay close. Jen is going to take over again and try to guide us through back where we started.
Yeah. So we've decided that it seems to be the. Oh, why is mine showing like that?
Oh, that's.
I just wanted people, you know,
Oh,
to see that
okay.
Tony sent a message here.
Yeah, he
He
resents
he
his,
just said he sent his thumbs up on that.
perfect. I thought that was something I did.
Still got a majority, but not a super.
It's.
If it's on that screen, that goes the drive.
Okay. Perfect. So, we've decided that the crux of the issue, we all have known this all along, it's the elephant in the room. The elephant has been speaking tonight, or today. I think we're ready to tackle it. I'm ready to tackle it. I'm excited about this. Is, do we change the by right density? Or do we just change the density as density bonuses for affordable housing? So that's our first question, but I want to go zone by zone, because I do think there's probably going to be nuance between low density, medium density, and high density. So let's have a little discussion on low density. Do we want to change the by right density, or do we want to leave it at 1 dwelling unit per 35 acres? Knowing that we've also added now 2 subordinate units, so technically you're getting 3 somewhat units on those properties, right? And only adjust the density as a bonus, and we'll talk about the actual bonuses and tiers in a minute. I just want to kind of get this in 2 different parts. So I'm gonna go back. Option 1 is leave low density at 1 per 35 and only apply a density bonus to affordable units. Option 2 would be increase low density to match the PUD requirements as a by right, and then also have the density bonuses. So who's in favor of option 1, which leaves the by right density at 35 for low density?
I have a quick question.
And we can discuss too if we need to.
Let's
Yeah.
discuss before we vote.
Sorry, I jumped in. I get very excited about this.
Are these low density?
Amy, could you grab the microphone from Kay?
Sorry. Are these areas low density or are they residential?
The light yellow on, the only residential zoning is down in Old Place.
Okay,
So what.
so
you're
that's
saying
low
on this
density.
zoning map, it's Elvis Sorrow, Raspberry Patch, the Preserve, Elk Run, and the Idorado Legacy. And it goes up onto the tailings, yeah. And then we've got a little bit down in Ilium Valley. Okay.
The second page.
Second page is that's the
Eastern
future
master
land
plan.
use map. So the lightest color of orange would be the residential low. And then the mid orange is residential medium, and boy, it's really not quite showing up well, that the high density darker orange. On the paper, it's hard for me to tell the difference.
So why is
I know which ones are.
low density on page 1 and a much bigger residential low on page 2?
Because page 2 is what the Easton master plan has planned.
So we
for.
were looking at the future
Expansion.
land use.
Yeah,
Did just stop talking.
it's currently zoned. So Holly, if you look at the first page, yeah, this is currently zoned low and the rest is probably. Yeah, and then with the Easton master plan, it's saying you could contemplate some additional low on the edges. It's not zoned that yet, though. It's zoned that, but it could be for this visionary plan.
But that's not this discussion, that's like later.
Correct. But thinking about that, that's what the Eastern master plan did. Expand some of that low density potential around where the existing low density is.
I see Nina's hand is up. Go ahead, Nina.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, my microphone's kind of weird. I am not in favor of just going with the ADUs because we've already talked about the fact that they're not really working that well and that they're going to probably require some work. The PUD already allows, or a PUD, if that's the route they take, already allows a 7, one dwelling unit per 7 acres. So I'm probably in favor of either just the by right being consistent with that, or possibly going with that density bonus. But what I have a question about is the density bonus become a use by right? Or is that only with criteria?
Yeah, so they would have to go through a process to get the higher densities.
Okay,
Whether it's a 1-step, 2-step, or 5-step. They probably have to go through the subdivision. I personally have, so, if you're gonna say that the only way you can get to the 1 dwelling unit per 7 acres, how much of that would have to be deed restricted?
okay.
And
So again,
I
that
think that's something that needs to be
I-
clarified because there needs, if we were to do, say, well, you can do 1 dwelling unit per 7 acres. If it's all deed restricted, that's just not gonna fly, especially for private development.
Would it help if we clarified with the word maximum, proposed maximum density? And so forth?
Yeah, I mean, that's inherent.
Yeah, it definitely should say proposed maximum.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with what Kay just said, although I might have misunderstood it. If we just, I'm just looking at medium, sorry, it's the one that's in front of me. The density bonuses are a subcategory to the area and bulk requirements permitted by right. That's pretty clear.
But table 7 shows the approval.
That's not as important as the land use code amendment itself.
That would be in the land use code.
Yeah.
Yeah, the approval process,
Yeah.
we moved around the categories to follow what's in the table. It would be at the time of plating, the commitment would need to be made that the developer is committing to that percentage of affordability to get the density approved.
Okay, yeah, so Nick, what you're noting is an old problem in our code where you'll notice that it says by right now. And this has come up before in other areas, and we do need to go through and strike that by right on all of our area and bulk requirements.
So there's 3 pages that have that
Yeah.
are relevant, yeah.
Yeah, we've been trying to
Okay.
catch those.
I mean, that is a huge discerning point.
Yeah.
For this. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, it's been noted. We'll make that adjustment.
Yeah, so it doesn't mean that they get it through an administrative review. They get it through the processes allowed in 5303 B through F, depending on whatever it is they're proposing.
I have a question about the map. Aren't there a lot more low density areas in San Miguel County? Like mesas and,
No, so all the low, medium and high density are in the east end of the county.
oh,
And-
that's a
yeah.
different zone.
Yeah.
Okay, so then that brings up another question. Are we not addressing the mesas by giving them the ability to, providing them an incentive to add an ADU if their HOA or whatever allowed it?
So it all goes back to water. On in the F zone, the minimum lot size is 35 acres. And the reason it's 35 acres is that is the lot size at which the state will issue a domestic well permit.
Oh, okay.
If any zone district is going to have allowed less than 35 acres, then those lots that are less than 35 acres must be served by a water system. Either municipal or create their own. But at the 35 acres, they can get a domestic well that can have up to 3 dwelling units. At less than 35 acres, they have to have a water system. And that's why, we haven't changed the F zone. aside from acknowledging that there could possibly be a second caretaker unit.
Mhm.
Paul, I saw your hand up.
This is a little bit off track, but I've been noodling with the idea that could we embed in all of this, whether it's administrative review or use by right, or whatever, to avoid the PUD, a timeline. Essentially, we're trying to encourage, if somebody's gonna do this, particularly around affordable housing, we want it done tomorrow. We don't want it done 10 years from now. And that's not inherent in any code, land use code. There's no incentive to, when you come to the table, we'll say, I'm gonna buy this piece of land. The problem now is people sit on it for 10 years, 15 years versus, these bonuses, these essentially incentives. Could we put a timeline so that it gets done sooner than later? And again, this is a little bit off track, but it does go to the inherent problem that we've got. We're sitting on a lot of land that could be developed as affordable housing. And we're also in a market where there's an incentive just to buy the land and sit on it, do nothing. So, we need a process to basically both incentivize to start construction sooner than later and finish it, but also de-incentivize somebody just buying a piece of land and sitting on it. And so just it's sort of out of left field, but I do think that it could alleviate some of the problems, because some of I think that the worries are what's going to happen 30 years from now.
Yeah, and I think the latter is not something that we can solve. We can't force someone to develop their property. And if they choose to just hold it, well, it's called land banking in our business. As to the development approval, our code requires that they commence work within 3 years in order to retain those entitlements that they've gotten approved. Now, there are instances where people have asked for extended vesting rights. And for whatever reason, and it's up to the VOCC as to whether or not they're going to approve that. But typically, standard vesting is 3 years. That comes from state statute.
Yeah.
So, there's an incentive for them to get underway with substantial work within 3 years.
So probably most of them come back for an extension on those vested rights.
Some do. Some don't.
Okay.
Hallie.
Exactly to your point, in a conversation with another one of the USSR members, who may or may not raise their hand to take credit for this. They had suggested that when subdividing and asking for the density bonus, perhaps there's an avenue to deed that over to the county. And say that this lot is going to be deed restricted. I don't want to develop it, but I will give it to the county with the deed restriction. And so maybe that's a workaround to this time.
Yeah, and so that's on our list. Right, with these, we're focusing on the zone districts. We need to do some cleanup and clarification in 5-13, which is the affordable housing section. And one of the things that we have flagged is to, for the for the subdivision requirement to, instead of having 1 out of every 3 lots, that they can deed land to us. So up to this point, that's been something negotiated through the PUD process. And yes, we definitely have that in our to-do list for 513.
Right.
But we're not tasking you guys with tackling 513 right now.
But that speaks to.
Yeah.
Jen, I'm curious of the fiscal viability, and maybe this is a question for Nick or Dan. If we were to only have a density bonus for affordable housing, what would it take to make that financially viable? Because otherwise, I think we're just asking people to buy a big lot and build a small neighborhood around them on their dream parcel. And I'm not sure that anyone's going to fall for that.
Lance, I think you're hitting a subject / question that will lead to an answer that's a totally different topic, but I'll take a stab at it.
Please do.
Private developers and PPPs in rarer instances very rarely will pounce on this. We're really talking about the governmental entities. And so, you know, it's sort of the subject is, what are we all doing here? We try and facilitate housing developed by private developers, via PPPs, or are we setting the stage for governmental entities? I'm going to say it's the latter of those three.
Thank you. I agree.
I'll leave it at that.
I would add a corollary to that.
Yeah.
That, housing in America has been built by the private market. And the reason we have an affordable housing crisis is we don't have the private market building affordable housing. So we need to figure out a bridge. And I think we're running, the danger here is we're prescribed. I totally agree, this should be about affordable housing. But we should leave the door open for the market to perform in this. There are going to be market conditions that appear that we haven't thought about. A 2.5% interest rate. Incomes are so high here that, and the market developer may come in and build, or quote unquote, affordable housing. But if we just think that all housing, affordable housing is going to get built by little nonprofits and or governments, we're never going to deal with the scale of the problem. The objective should be to have a land use code that actually brings the private sector in to build affordable housing.
Paul, I agree. I agree with you. I think we're in agreement on all of this. And what Paul just said about the private market, and I mean, I'm optimistic that someday there will be, maybe not in the distant future, and technology can be amazing what it can bring. But I think if we are going to open that door, this is why I just so firmly believe on having a number of caps, a cap on units per development, and relationship to the master plan directly. Because if we take seriously this mission of increasing affordable housing stock while preserving community character, that's the only way to marry the two opposing forces. Is there a risk to it? I don't see it. I don't see the risk in doing that. Again, I may be short-sighted on it, but by doing it, we keep the door open for the what ifs.
And it's worth the risk.
It's worth the risk, but those guardrails are just too important for us to not consider. Otherwise, I think that's what you're hearing today is a good chunk of us are like, geez, you're gonna let the free market go? Boy, we're gonna have a lot of high-end condos on big acre lots. And that is true. That is true. That does and can and will happen. It's happened in other communities.
Lead first and tell.
There may not be a, speaking in terms of value, there may not be a generic answer to this question, but what happens to a property's value if the property owner applies for and receives a density bonus? And I'm thinking in terms of tax valuation. Or if we were to change the rules and say, okay, you got 35 acres in low density, you now have higher density rights. What does that do to the property's value?
If it's state restricted, it caps the appreciate or, the value. If the property is going to be deed restricted.
Even undeveloped.
Undeveloped, deed restricted, it's going to cap the property assessment.
Which caps the tax burden.
Tax.
Conversely, if it's not deed restricted, the property value, I know guys that's their business. They buy land, they get entitlements, and they flip the land. They never develop a thing.
All you have to do is look outside Denver to see that the large property owners that have subdivided and now have 10 houses on their land instead of just their one old farmhouse. That's the model.
And is that tax savings by accumulating higher density capabilities attractive?
Yeah, there wouldn't
to the property owner?
Sorry, there wouldn't be any tax difference because your cost basis is based on when you buy. So it doesn't matter if the value goes up, it matters when you sell it. And that's when you get the title. So if you have increased density, then conceptually you could build more or your value would go up. Right. Therefore, you have a capital gain when you sell it. But everyone avoids capital gains with 1031 exchanges, other things. So the whole point it's not gonna negatively incentivize them. It would increase the value, which to me is concerning.
I'm a smaller thinker. I was actually thinking just about property taxes, not capital gains, but I take the point.
Just to make that point, I think what Lee's talking about is carrying costs, effectively. Does it actually incentivize the lower carrying costs to do this? And there may be a margin there, but again, in terms of incentives, it might be one of those straws that you hope breaks the can.
Yeah, and just. Zoning and tax assessments are not the same. We explain that to people all the time. If somebody has a 35-acre parcel and they're running their 4 cattle for a week or a month, whatever the time period is, and they meet the agricultural exemption, they're going to be paying agricultural tax rates on it. Even if it's zoned for high density, and they could hypothetically have 15 dwelling units per acre. That's not how it's going to be assessed. They could go ahead and get their entitlements, but they continue to have the cattle on there. They continue to pay the ag assessment. It's only when they start to do the improvements to develop that higher density that it then changes to a higher classification on taxes. So assessors are worried, are concerned with what's actually happening on the land, not how it's zoned.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
I know we're focusing in this table on low, medium, and high, which is all East End. But based on the discussion we just had, I would have begged the question, do we not want any kind of density bonuses on F or Rice Mesa rural ag? We just not want any kind of West End development?
As I explained, those have the 35-acre minimum because of the water. So we're not, aside from the caretaker secondary unit thing, we're not trying to come up with ideas on how to encourage employee housing out there. And there's also access, transportation, do we want people going farther out and having to drive on narrow gravel roads, what have you.
Do we still have state land though on Hastings and Wilson?
Oh, yeah, there's state land parcels all over the county.
Yeah, I mean,
They're gonna look at what they. But if they've got a section of land, they tried to sell one for a lot of money and had no takers a couple of years ago, but again, the state could issue a planning lease to somebody who would come in and say, hey, I want to build all this housing up here, and we'd say, what about your water, what about your access? And
Does our zoning still count too?
and yeah, what about our zoning? So yeah, I actually get inquiries from time, about every 6 months. Hey, I'm, miles from the nearest road and I have no water, so I think I'm gonna build affordable housing, and aren't I wonderful? No, you're not.
And how does I know we've recently started counting and inventorying the number of non-conforming properties, particularly further out, that aren't 35 acres, that they have water, they have well rights, right?
Yes, if it's a legally non-conforming lot, then they could have a residential well, meaning that they don't get that second or third dwelling unit. They can only have one dwelling unit.
Okay.
And I just wanted to go back to Hallie's question. Rice Mesa Town Residential, currently by right density is basically 17 dwelling units per acre. And then Placerville Residential is 1 unit per 18,750 square feet. So they're already calibrated at a higher density. And that's another reason that we left those be.
Yeah, and also the Down Valley Master Plan will be next year. That'll include a water and wastewater element. And it could be in the future that if water can be developed to serve Placerville, then those lot sizes could be decreased. But right now, that's what all those non-conforming lots, what they can do to get, both well and septic on the same site.
But I guess I would suggest we have a conversation, which we had at our very first meeting, I think, about how to incentivize those folks that are 1 in 35. We're not going to mess with them because they're too far out and they only have they already have the right to have a caretaker unit. How do we incentivize them to actually build that unit and put a local person in it? And we're not addressing that in this because they're not even included.
Yeah, well, no, we do have, so that's where allowing the second caretaker and allowing greater setbacks. That's all could come up with to offer.
In zone F?
Yes.
Okay.
So one is a use by right zona, one additional current review. And then we also tackle rights to
And the restrictions of proximity were eliminated, which is a big one.
Yeah. The only other thing that you could add to that, and it's not really a land use code thing, it's just more of a policy thing, would be, what do we call that? Having architectural,
Plans.
pre-approved plans, thank you. The words just don't come sometimes. So having pre-approved architectural plans can reduce a little bit of the cost and provide another incentive. It has been successful in some communities, but you're still outlaying the construction cost and everything.
And we haven't really dived into that, it's something that, it's in the report, it's an idea and we could get into it. We haven't, fully headed that way because, the high variability of topography makes it a little bit difficult to have, pre-approved plans.
I'd also weigh in I think properly we should be leaning towards as much development support as we can appropriately on the east end and not exacerbate the commute problem that we already have. And I'm sure Tony would back me up on that. It's articulated that before. So I think our focus is probably appropriate.
I do feel like our highest benefit when it comes to really generating affordable housing is the low density, medium density, high density zones, and then adjusting community housing. I think that's where we get our most benefit.
Right. I think Nina has her hand up.
Thank you. Go ahead, Nina.
So I gotta weigh in again, being a Norwood resident. We need housing in Norwood. We have a lot of people living here. We have a lot of seniors. We have a medical center. We have a school. We have a lot of facilities here. We have federal employees. We have county employees. We need housing in Norwood too. So I just gotta always weigh in on that. That's kind of why I'm even participating with this group. So whatever we do, I just want that kept on the radar. And the main area, as far as unincorporated county, would be those perimeter areas around the town of Norwood that are unincorporated. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Nina.
Another thing that I forgot to bring up on the F zone, I believe we have the co-housing in there. And that's something that, individual property owners, a few of them have come and asked us to do. And so far we've had to tell them, sorry, we can't. And I also thought of a situation where somebody really did want that second caretaker unit and they would have been willing to deed restrict it. And alternatively, they had to do a very gerrymandered property line adjustment to get it to work, to get that extra unit in that they wanted. So there definitely have been opportunities and people interested. You haven't heard about them because they're not getting past what the current zone says.
Shall we? Which one are you on? This one? Yeah, so back to low density, I think that's been a really great conversation. And if we can kind of decouple them a little bit, after what we've heard, where are we sitting on low density by right density allowance. We still thinking
We're
that?
back to your option one, option.
Yeah, so option one would be,
Yes, no question.
yeah, okay. Option one is leave the by right at 1 per 35. Option two is increase the by right to 1 per 7 or something else.
Oh, there was an option 3, wasn't there? Only increase the density if the outcome is additional for.
Yeah, that would be option one, I guess. It would be leaving the by right at 35.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Only
okay.
increase with the, yeah.
Do you want votes on option one? Or
Let's do, I think so. Let's vote on option one first. Who wants to leave the by right density in only low density at 35? 1 per 35.
But you have to add the other.
And then you
comment.
add the, yes, and then also the density allowances for affordable. 2, 3, 4, 5,
Tony's got a hand up as well,
7, okay.
as does
And
Nina.
Nina. Okay, so we are not touching the by right density of low density. We'll talk in a minute about what we want to do with density bonuses on that one. So let's move into medium density. Let's have some discussion on pros and cons, I suppose, of increasing that by right to 1 per 3. Kay, remind us, ski ranches.
Ski ranches
A
is,
PUD already at 1 per 3.
it's actually a subdivision because it's older.
Okay,
But yeah, it is zone medium density. I don't know what their exact density is, but they're zone medium. And there's a couple of others, Hillside and
Last dollar.
yeah, Last Dollar subdivision.
Talia saw your hand up.
Yeah, right here.
Society Trails.
Oh, it's here.
The max density
Yeah.
PUD, is that stated somewhere, or can we also change that? Like the 1 DU per 7 on low density by PUD, is that stated somewhere?
it is stated in the code currently, but good question.
So we could also.
We could always change that.
Is that something you're interested in discussing, Helen?
I don't know, I haven't done a PUD, so I don't know if we need to, but that's why I'm like, okay, we're saying no on low density, the right and 1 per 7. We obviously know that's a PUD process and only allow 1 per 7.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know the answer.
Let's put a pin in that for now
Okay.
and talk about it when we talk about the density bonuses.
Yeah.
The other consideration with medium density is what the East End Master Plan prescribes. I might have to pull that specifics up. Robin, could you easily pull up what the East End Master Plan prescribes for medium and high? Because it's around that same density.
Yeah, give me just a moment.
Okay.
Yes.
And while she's doing that, are there any initial thoughts on medium?
Jared,
Just because I did study planning at some point. It doesn't make sense to have a low and a medium density zone district that have the exact same standard. Right? It kind of defies purpose. I think it is something that my first look through our land use code, my first stop was, why do we have so many zone districts? When many of them say the same thing. And so I think that is just my kind of prompt to say, does it make sense to actually make this a different zone district somehow?
Very good point.
But, you know, keeping in mind that there are properties that are now zoned. And, if you change it, you have to rezone. And,
They wouldn't just grandfather in.
we try to avoid creating nonconformities.
So this medium density, you said is the ski ranches, right?
So the largest.
That's an example. I'm just saying, that's an example, the ski ranches, but their lots are not 3 acres.
What they did was they clustered their developments. And like I said, I'm not sure that
that they fully exercise their 3 dwelling units or 3 acres per dwelling unit. They also have a lot of open space parcels up
So they,
there.
when they did the PUD or whatever, they,
When they did their subdivision.
Subdivision, sorry.
Subdivision dates our zoning.
right.
So our zoning was crafted to kind of accommodate. We've also got Hillside and we've got Last Dollar subdivision that are zone medium density. So you can see that there's a scale.
Robin has provided us the East End Master Plan future density suggestions in the chat. And if you could pull those up, Nicola.
Get into Robin. Oh.
Are they gonna put it up there?
Yeah, Robin.
I can just say it too. So for low, it's 1 unit per 7 to 35 acres. For medium, 1 unit per 1 to 7 acres. And then for high, just more than 1 unit per acre is in the East End Master Plan.
So with this proposal, that 1 per 3 is in the middle of what the Easton Master Plans prescribed.
Is there some magic about the 1 per 2.2 versus 2.4 acres? That's pretty specific.
Yes, it was 100% based on the percentages. And we left them as is to tie directly to the percentages for the conversation today, knowing that we'll probably want to take out that fraction.
So why not go like 5432? Or 7654, like that, just like, it's easier to see.
I had actually asked if there were too many tiers.
Right. I felt like
I
when
think
we
there
first
are.
did the calculations, it ended up with too many tiers as well.
Especially 25 to 35.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jen, is there any reason, I sorry, I'm asking a question that I posted, but that the unit of measurement, so to speak, can't be homogenized to be X dwelling units per acre, as
It could be.
opposed to
Right.
1 dwelling units per Y acres? It's just incredibly confusing to. Is there any reason, like, so for example,
Right.
again, for this, in the medium density under the 50% bonus, 1 dwelling per 2 acres would just be one, would be 0.5 dwelling units per
Right.
acre.
We could totally do that if we wanted to be consistent.
Having worked with a code like that, it is very confusing to the average person because it requires math. So if you say 0.33 dwelling units per acre, that means 1 dwelling unit per 3 acres. But they get very confused by that. And I have had to explain density and flipping from units per acre to people per acre. And it's confusing and there is a break.
I can see that. Is the break typically when you get to higher densities?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I would also say I actually love this because then in the report, if you look back at table 2, the proposed minimum lot size for low density is 7 acres. So if you allow 1 dwelling unit per 7 acres, the minimum lot size is 7 acres. It all adds up in your head. So keeping those two kind of dovetailed, it's pretty.
But then it falls apart at high density.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Right.
And actually, I think I need to look at this some more myself. If we require a minimum lot size of 7 acres, then we're not going to get clustered development.
I was just thinking about that earlier
If
too.
we want clustered development, then you set the minimum lot size at, say, 1 acre. But the density at 7 acres per dwelling. And then, so that goes back to the scenario that I explained early on, where if it's 35 acres, they could have 5 units with an average of 7. So density is averaged. Minimum lot size is straight division.
Well, you would still have clustered on your 7 acres, it would just be a bigger cluster.
Well, no, you'd have 7 acre chunks. They'd all be the same size and they'd all be spread out. What you could do is your 4 or 5 1 acre pieces, and then the rest is open space, or 4 1 acre parcels and 1 really big parcel.
So I'm not hearing a lot of discussion on the medium density.
It's hard because most of these yellow neighborhoods are developed. So it's like, are we saying that if we increase the density in Altasura where I live, I could couple that with the ADU thing and put an ADU in my
So-
yard?
If you're in an existing subdivision or PUD, the ability to further subdivide, add density, add units would be subject to working through your covenants and then amending that subdivision or PUD. But the master plan does envision some lands that are not currently zoned low density or medium density or high density, but could be zoned in the future.
Okay, so we're talking about pretty much future development.
Yeah.
Right.
So I can see on page one, there's all sorrow, page two, there's where more low density, medium density
Could be. Well, I would think we would, whatever we choose to be the new density, we should maybe consider option one again, which is that you only get that, whatever that is, if you're adding affordable housing.
Although to Jared's point, having low, medium and high all at 1/35 by right just is weird.
It is weird. Well, yeah, and it goes back again to that it was by right because the assumption was that the land has not been developed, which meant it didn't have water. That's why the 1/35 is there. They don't have a water system yet. And it was only when the water system gets developed that by going through a discretionary process, so 1-step, 2-step PUD, whichever it is. That's when the water system got reviewed and that's when the higher density kicked in. That's the reasoning.
So if we go to 1/3 acres by right, we still have the developed water.
They would still have to go through the subdivision process to subdivide, and that's where they would be allocating the water. Yeah. But it wouldn't have to be a PUD. The nice thing about a straight subdivision versus a PUD is there's a lot of discretion in a PUD. PUDs typically, when they were first established, were more established to go above and beyond the standard. San Miguel County uses a PUD effectively as just any way to do anything other than 35 acres. So if you think about it that way, it's still a process, it's still a public process to subdivide the land. You'd still have to go through all the same process to allocate the water, but it doesn't have all that discretion in there that a PUD would have.
I'd like to make a comment about deterrence, because here we're talking a lot about facilitating. The historical reason for the 1 dwelling unit per 35 acres in low, medium, and high, which does seem weird at face value, was done to deter the water being overconsumed. I mean, I'm generalizing. That's
process too.
fair way to say. Yeah, but as we move forward, we are in a situation where we are trying to facilitate housing. Why would we not continue the deterrence of the past? And not, if we're again back to, some of the former comments, myself included, is that if one house is built, you need to build a affordable unit. If you allow a 35-acre parcel to build more on it, whatever the number might settle on, you once again are just exacerbating the problem, even though the math looks better and the essence of the reason is a little different today than it was 30 years ago. So I'm kind of with Lainey on stick with just the affordables in medium. Now, when we get to high, maybe there's a break point, and we have to we might shift our thinking. But the medium seems still in that category.
I'm persuaded as well. But Lainey and Nick are.
Can I just ask a question then?
Yeah.
Is there a scenario where someone buys a medium density lot, builds their one house and never develops that lot? And do you care?
Sure.
Yes.
Yes, there is that scenario.
We can't mandate that.
Right, I guess we can't mandate that anyway, if you have the right, but
We can incentivize if we figure that section out.
Fully understand the through line of what makes suggested.
Lee, you've got to use this guy.
I still don't fully understand the through line of what you're suggesting there.
The through line?
Yeah,
Okay, let me try to restate it.
thanks.
If there is some kind of consensus, or we can, a statement of fact, that free market homes that are built wherever, in however many quantity, are one of the reasons there's an impact that then subsequently requires deed restricted housing. Is that a fair statement of fact? I mean,
Yes.
without commentary on
The
it.
entire basis for.
Exactly.
Yes.
If that's the case, why would we, at least in the medium density zone district, why would we ever shift away from the very restrictive maximum density by right of 1 unit per 35 acres? That was catalyzed by something a little different than what we're talking about, water. Why would we change that when all that change would do would exacerbate our problem?
So you're in favor of option one?
Yeah, if there was a one option one, yeah.
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 I guess,
That was clear from.
I guess I'm not as afraid that there's going to be rampant development. And I think if we're looking at something to, maybe deal with our housing problem, smaller lots kind of get us to that area. And we've still got the well permits and, road access and everything else that goes along with it. So I'm not as afraid of the big bad developer.
I mean, it's not a fear, it's a reality of economics. It's not a fear.
I understand the economics argument, Nick, but I also understand just what the market is.
So,
right
so
now.
let me make sure I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
That if we reduce the maximum proposed density by right, not the bonuses for housing, we're talking free
Right,
market.
Right.
And we reduce it to 1 dwelling unit per 3 or whatever,
Five
or
or
5 or
whatever,
whatever it
yeah.
might be, as opposed to 35, that you believe the workforce will be able to afford those lots and build houses?
No, but I'm suggesting that when you look at what's going on with sustainability in the world, we're just encouraging more wealthy, development, without looking at, I'm sorry, I just think it's very exclusionary to leave it at 1 to 30.
We see it differently, but that's
Yeah.
okay.
Dan, then Lee.
Chime in just really quick. I think Alvasar is a great example. The lot size of Alvasar was very, very small. You are not getting small houses.
No.
They are not reasonable. No one within the typical working community within Telluride can afford a free market house. So let's just be
I understand that.
So although I get the concept of, oh, well, we smaller lots, therefore we're gonna have maybe more units, and therefore hopefully we get some individuals living within those units within our community, but I don't think that that's the case in this community because of the wealth in this community. I think you'll just have more wealthy houses and more of them, as opposed to, more individuals within housing. that
Amy-
are working on it.
Danny, thank you for articulating this thing. Is it what you don't like, I think you're gonna have more of if you make this change.
And Amy, what I think you've touched on is where Jared was with conventional
Right.
market versus our wacky market. And while you're right in much of the world, I think Dan and Nick are right in our corner of the world. Leah, think I saw your hand up, and then Kay.
So 4 houses or 6 houses of appropriate size on a 35-acre lot are not a better situation than 1 house.
Free market.
Whatever.
Well, Lee, for example, to answer your question, I'm on Wilson Mesa.
Hmm?
5 to 15 acre lots. The houses up there are all over $1 million. Some of of them are 2 or 3, and that's even 30 plus units. So if we're looking at developing, say, in Ilion Valley on 3-acre parcels, those are gonna be more expensive than my neighbor's house, because they're even closer to town. I would buy one in a heartbeat if I could afford it. But I don't think there's gonna be $1 million house down there. Because there's more demand.
So keep in mind, someone has the hypothetical 35-acre parcel. In order to, even if we say that they can have 1 dwelling unit per 3 acres or per 7, whichever zone district we're in. In order to do that, they're going to have to go through the subdivision. And that's going to be a major subdivision, so it's gonna be a 5-step process. They're also going to have to probably go through rezoning. That's a 2-step process. So there's a lot of process in there already. And then also, once they do that subdivision, they're either going to have to deed restrict 1/3 of their lots, or they're going to have to work out a deal to provide land. The latter is probably more favorable to everybody involved. So, just keep in mind, these aren't standalone. These aren't the only thing that's going on. We've got the subdivision process, we've got the rezone process, we've got the employee housing mitigation requirements for subdivisions.
Assuming that you were able to jump through all the hoops for rezone and subdivision, I still question whether the 1 per 3 unit ratio is enough to catch up. And I think I agree with Nick that it isn't. And so we're just going to continue to fall behind, even though people will have to go through some hoops to get there. As a community, as a region, we aren't winning.
And effectively, the zone districts that are going to be most useful for catching up and keeping up are going to be the high density, the affordable housing PUD, the community housing zone.
Right.
And possibly maybe the mixed use zone, but I don't see that one being used much. Could be.
So if I understood what you just said, then for medium, it doesn't make sense for us to do much adjustment. There's not much bang for the buck, and I would keep my vote with Nick and Elaine. Correct.
All right. Any other discussion on that, or do we want to go ahead and throw a vote up and see where we land?
This is for
medium density, option 1 would be you want to keep it at 1 per 35 by right, and we'll talk about density bonuses as part of affordability. And option 2 would be increasing the by right density to 1 per 3 or 1 per 5 or whatever, we can adjust that. So who's in favor of option 1, which is keeping the by right density at 1 per 35? Okay. Cheers. Kind of figured we were landing that way based on the conversation. Okay, so we're keeping the by right density in medium. I actually really appreciated that conversation. I will have to admit that flipped my opinion of that. I think we need to really look hard at the bonuses then on that one. Let's move to medium density. Or high, sorry.
Please.
I was looking right at high, saying medium. High density. Let's have a little conversation about increasing the by right density on that. It sounded from the last conversation like there might be some appetite for increasing the by right density. It's very small pieces of land as identified by the East End Master Plan.
It's like an overturn off. I can't really tell.
It is really hard to tell on here.
Can we go through those parcels?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the potential high density areas.
This is on page 2 of our maps.
Yeah, down at the Ophir Loop,
Yeah.
a little bit at
Is that all?
in Ilium. A
little bit in Ilium.
High's not-
some in Ilium, because
So is it possible to put a
Yeah,
slide? up
Robin,
on-
do you have the maps printed, the medium and high printed very
Actually, I would just
similarly?
project what we've
Do you
got.
wanna pull up?
If you could, stop share, I'm gonna project.
Oh, you've got it?
Okay.
I'm gonna project our web map because that way we don't have to guess
Oh,
which
okay.
orange we got.
Perfect.
And again, these are not currently zoned, but it's what the Eastern Master Plan divisions.
Correct.
Right now, do we have a limit zone?
Nothing zone high.
So, thank you.
No, Mountain Village was zoned high.
Oh, yeah, Mount Village, sorry.
And then once it
Incorporated.
incorporated, yeah. What the heck? It's all featured on this. Oh, there we go. Okay, so, the Mill Creek area, we put residential high mixed use, but they're gonna proceed with the development they've got.
Which is.
On Mill Creek along the Valley Fork.
But what's the density?
It's low density residential zoning. So then we've got the residential high mixed use of the Ilium parcels and the Alexander property. Going all the way south of the road, all the way down to Deep Creek. And then also looking at the Forest Service piece, that's near there as well.
So you're saying that's high density,
That is residential high mixed use. I'll zoom in a bit. The future land use map says it's residential high mixed use. So that means it could be rezoned to high density or community housing or AHPUD.
You're saying.
Would you guys be willing to put that up, the graph or the chart on the screen that shows what the possibilities are for residential high?
Can we just kind of go through the map?
But that'll answer your
Yeah,
question.
I'm just trying to figure out which
Yeah.
parcels.
And what that big square was, where's that big square? That
So
was,
this that's Forest Service.
So is it?
where is it though?
So this
Oh,
is.
yeah.
Here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Could be, yeah.
These could be.
And yeah, somebody else can be looking up the master plan and be ready to project that because.
I've got it.
So both of those parcels, I'm sorry, Kate, but both those parcels are potentially high density residential mixed use.
Yeah, and this piece here is already zoned community housing.
Okay.
In the low forestry or.
They were identified through the East End master plan process as potential for having the
Yes.
meeting a series of criteria
Now
to
we're moving
accommodate.
south.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. And
That's
so,
it.
yeah, that's residential high mixed use, which could be. The most common ones would be high density community housing or AHPUD. And then as you go down the Ilium Valley, got a residential medium here, which would be medium density or community housing. And I think AHPUD, there's some residential low capacity down here. And that could be rezoned to residential low or AHPUD, I think.
Kate, these guys.
Thank you. Dan, or rather Tony, let's let Kay finish our tour here and then we'll go to you first as soon as she's done.
And then we've got some residential high mixed use around the Ophir Loop because there is a potential for some mixed use commercial type development there. And then around San Bernardo, the Pathfinder Pit and over to the Matterhorn Work Center, that's residential medium, so that could be community housing, AHPD, or the medium density zoning. So those were the key opportunities that aren't already somehow developed. We don't have a lot of opportunities.
That's super helpful to see that because the map can't tell. Just medium,
Yeah, that the orange colors are not reading well on there.
Yeah, the original map, the high is a little bit more red.
Well,
Just printed it.
and the reason this is important is it turns this sort of abstract idea about. Are we gonna build housing, where are we gonna build, how much density, and okay, we know these areas, right? And I think it's important to tie it back to the reality of, we only have limited opportunities in the valley. Very, very limited.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Kay, can you continue with your tour? Just go east of the town of Telluride. I'm curious about east of Idorado Legacy.
So, that really doesn't have any development potential out there. Because, all the land that, can be built on has already been, platted. And there may be some vacant lots out there. Tailings have the, restriction on them that they can't penetrate it, so. All of that was put into the conservation, which is the very large lot, kind of a catch-all similar to the F zone. So yeah, that east is about as built out as it can get.
Thank you.
Talking high now, yeah.
Okay. If we're done with this, I'll stop sharing. We need to go back to yours.
Theoretically, yes. Look at that, it's nice.
It's the big screen.
Okay, so with that in mind,
Got a bunch of filters changed.
let's just kind of talk through, are we generally thinking we do want to increase the by right density on high density?
No, I don't
Still-
think so, but I'm just one opinion. Unless it's affordable, of course.
Unless it's affordable.
Yeah.
There's no current land zoned high density.
Correct.
Yeah, it would again have to go through a
It'd have to go through a
rezone and a
rezone.
subdivision.
We're planning.
The other thing that kind of losing sight of, once they do the subdivision, these lots are created. We're then looking at the code as to what process do they have to go through to get their development permit? And are you saying that once they get subdivided, they have to, come back through? I want to spend some time with this, and make it make sense.
I think we all do.
Okay.
If we were to increase the proposed density by right to high density and high density to the 15 units as described, would that require a subdivision? Or
They would have to go through some process. If they wanted to create lots, 15 lots for the 15 dwelling units, they would have to go through the subdivision. Hypothetically, they could keep it all one big lot and do a condominium type thing, but then that's getting into we have multifamily listed as requiring, a higher level of review.
they could do, this is sort of back to Paul's hypothetical 2 acres. They could do up to 30 units on those 2 acres as a cottage arrangement, once we get that into the code. Right? So tiny homes or whatever those are. Okay, without subdividing.
There are land ownership methods that don't require a land division, yes.
That probably makes resale.
Nick.
Question, and it may not have an answer because it's a future process. When the West End master plan gets redone, is there a general intention to put future land use categories that designate certain areas or parcels as eligible for high density zoning? So I'll use it as an example for kind of what Paul may have been alluding to earlier. If adjacent to town, there's a 35-acre parcel, is it the intention for the future land use map to say, yeah, it's appropriate to have high density around the town limits of Norwood, And therefore, those properties then become eligible for this zoning if somebody wants to rezone.
So the
Fit.
Rights Mesa master plan identifies the areas that can be there's 4 land use classifications. So there's Rights Mesa rural agriculture, which is close to the current Rights Mesa of 35 acres. And then there's the Rights Mesa rural residential, which is getting closer into the town and has a higher density and can, because it can be served by Norwood Water. There's the Rights Mesa light industrial, and there's a couple of areas of that that are shown. And then there's the Rights Mesa town residential. So the Rights Mesa master plan future land use specifically ties to zone districts that we already have.
Okay.
And yeah, it gets, as it gets closer to town, the densities get higher.
Okay. So, and I'm sorry, I think I said West End, not Rights Mesa.
Yeah.
So is it possible then, I mean, again, I'm just trying to paint a picture of a scenario because it very much might affect how we view the by rights on this as well as the bonuses. Is it possible that a 35 acre part or a large parcel adjacent or in, we'll call the red zone of the future land use map could get rezoned to one of these zone districts?
So if it's on Rights Mesa, no, because these zone districts aren't, do not implement the master,
Okay.
the Rights Mesa master plan. These zone districts implement the East End master
These are-
plan.
Okay. And that's, yeah, that's a distinction that I'm not sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So do you think in the future there'd be like a Rights Mesa low density and a Rights Mesa high density?
Possibly.
Who knows?
Possibly, maybe, but we'll think about that another day.
Knowing that our time is starting to get tight.
Yeah.
And that we still need to circle back and talk about the really hard idea of density bonuses in both low and medium. Let's see if we can get the fundamental question answered for high density, having had the tour, kind of knowing what we're talking about as far as areas close to the East End. Do we want to increase the use by right to the 15 proposed or leave it at the 135 with ADU? And I think I know Elaine and Nick's answer, which is do not increase it for the free market.
And so I wanted to answer a question that was asked earlier. To Kay's point, if you wanted to build a condo on your 2 acres of high density and not do anything deed restricted, it would still be 1 step review for anything other than a duplex, basically. And then anything bigger than that would be 2 steps. So there's still review layers in that.
Yeah, there are other layers of the code that apply and that kick in.
Lee,
Kay, if we were to go with a 15 DU per acre, use by right, the allocation of deed restricted would be 1 to 3, unless we change it.
Yeah, so they would have to, if they were doing either individual single family lots or condo type, we would gain 1/3 of those lots or units as deed restricted under the current code.
Okay,
And
so
then what the rest of these density bonuses are trying to do is say, hey, you can get more density, you can get more height, whatever we've got written in there. If you deed restrict all of those, it's kind of like what we did at Society Turn, where we said on certain lots, you can get an extra 10 feet of height if it is used solely for extra employee housing. And all deed restricted, so.
right. Okay, so if we have a 2 acre parcel that's high density, they can have up to 30 units. And 10 of them would be required to be deed restricted and the other 20 would be free market.
Yeah.
In a highly dense development. By right. And the concern, I take the concern, certainly, that those 20 units would be free market. But wouldn't the valuation of that space keep the prices of those other 20 units more in line?
It all depends on, on how it's designed and laid out.
Yeah.
Where it is.
an anecdotal answer to that question is, and I agree, it all depends where and what, but surely hasn't kept the town price of units in town down, has it?
But do we have it?
No, I'm just saying density, when you go to that kind of density, you know, if it's a piece of property in the right location with the right desirability, town is just a demonstration that the sky's the limit on free market.
Yeah, look at the transfer condos that are across the street from deed restricted condos in Silver Gap. That hasn't impacted the value of those transfer to still in condos.
There, you know, sometimes, you know, some of the projects that and the town has a very similar requirement that we do. You know, that if you're building a multifamily type project, you have to build a certain number of units and such. And for example, element 52, they put all of the required employee units down on the lowest level.
Underground.
They're underground, yeah. And you know, they didn't get the top. And you know, some cities and you know, some of the places that I worked with in California, they actually said they have to have a similar quality. So you couldn't, you know, just have your tiny dark unit. They had to be a similar quality, but that's.
Well, so just a clarification, the deed restrictions is an R1 deed restriction.
Yes.
And does that include income limits,
No,
And
appreciation caps?
Yes.
Okay.
not yet.
That's a material issue.
Yes.
Right,
Yes.
so we get 30 deed restricted units, 30% of the deed restricted units. But we've got $3 million deed restricted homes now
That's
in the
right.
market.
Yeah.
So
the current deed
not to get us off track.
No, you're not.
Paul, that's exactly why I said we need a deep dive into the deed restrictions, that the asterisk that I requested earlier in the meeting.
Paul, as somebody who kind of sits in both this committee and also the SMRHA and also the commissioners, every one of those groups I just listed agrees with the observation you just made that building more Lawson Hill style deed restriction housing or Aldosoro style isn't the solution. So I believe that even the Mountain Village, which has yet to come with a firm proposal, has in informal discussions, work sessions with the county commissioners said, we don't want to do another Lawson Hill style deed restriction or Aldosoro if we build anything in LA, and we need to figure out some way to keep the prices from skyrocketing. Jared.
I was just gonna mention this, when I think about this, it's the nice one because there is nothing identified. We've gone through the tour of the land use map. And to me, I guess the incentive for adjusting that base density would be, this would be the one opportunity we would potentially have to get a private developer to build, and we get one of three into the deed restricted market, right? And so this seems like the one spot, you know, where we couldn't see that line in medium density. But in this high density, it seems like the one spot where the juice might be worth that squeeze to say, hey, you know, we know that they're gonna build more $1, $3, $5 million condos. But for every 2 of those, there's gonna be one deed restricted condo that gets developed.
Fair enough.
Jared, earlier I made the comment about, let's see when we get to high, and that's exactly the thought process that was going on in my head. What we don't have in front of us, which unfortunately doesn't give us all the ammunition to make an educated, informed decision, is what are we doing with the density for bonuses? If the distribution of the bonuses, and I'm just going to use kind of extreme examples, if we just take and say 100% of the units are affordable, then you get a bonus. And we just don't even do 25 or 35 or 50, do it like that. It changes the sort of thought process on the free market. But let's take it to if you do 10% as a low number, if you do if you do 90% affordable, you can do 10%. That changes the thinking of what you do with free market. So it's kind of intertwined, so it is a little bit difficult. It wasn't so difficult in low and medium, but on this one, it's a little more difficult to make that informed decision without having the discussion that we may not have time for, which is what are our bonuses.
And we kind of did that in community housing, but we started on the opposite end. So, the stuff that had the lower level review, you could do just a little bit of free market. And then, so like one step and then at 2-step, you could do more free market. And then if you went PUD, you could do a lot more free market. So it's kind of, the upside down version of all the other stuff.
Process.
The process incentive.
It's a process incentive, but also recognizing that the free market units can be helped to the sale of free market units can be helped to finance and subsidize the deed restricted units.
And building on exactly that comment, I think both of you, and especially you made a point a few months ago that knowing the high density zone is in the East End and knowing sales prices in the East End, we can probably get pretty aggressive here. Because you could say one $10 million condo can float 10 affordable housing developments. So the density bonus here could be really aggressive.
Yeah.
And maybe should be, probably should.
In theory, I can get behind this, saying like this is a part where you still get deed restricted units out of it. The only hangup that I have is that piece of land that's Forest Service right now. My thought is if that wasn't part of it, I'd probably be feeling really differently about it. But if we're gonna take what was previously protected forest land and building on it high density, that better be solving the problem. I don't want to see a single free market unit.
And that is fully the intent. And there's other stuff in motion, but yeah, the Forest Service isn't going to be, I hope. I mean, we all know about the 1990s land trades, but where they're at right now, it would be affordable housing or deed.
Right now, we're looking at a minimum density of 15 DU per acre. Could we change the way that the county code works so that it's not a 2-unit and 1-unit deed restricted to have that come in higher? Is that,
in other words, increase?
in other words, change the affordable housing requirement with that, with the high density district?
Totally, yeah.
Because I think that makes much more sense than looking at
So
2 units of free market and 1 unit.
even if we were to just to try to make the math easy, go 50-50.
Yeah, or something, whatever.
75,
Yeah.
3/4.
I think that's the only way I would look at increasing density.
Okay. I follow your logic and that also crossed my mind. Does anyone else agree with trying to come up with a magic number there? A different percentage instead of a third? We go to a half or 3/4 or somewhere in between.
You mean for the by right number?
For the by right number, yes.
Yeah.
So just by right, it's automatically more than the county's one.
Nope, I'm sorry, I wasn't very clear. What I believe Amy's saying is that we would change the requirement of the county that instead of mitigating 1 unit per every 2 free markets, that we would up that requirement to say you built 4 units, 2 of them would have to be deed restricted. If you built, we could say you build 4 units and 3 of them have to be deed restricted. You still get that opportunity for the one expensive free market that hopefully carries the rest of the project. And this is where I just don't know where that break point is. Kay's making the break space.
Well, you've got to relate the number or the affordable housing need to some real
Right,
need.
yeah, there's a.
You can't just arbitrarily.
I remember
There's a
that.
linkage study that led to that. It's
Mhm.
Yeah.
old, but it's there.
Yeah.
So, and that's in 513.
Mm-hmm.
And 513 is not in our current scope. I'm not saying it's not something to look at. I'm saying that we need to make what we're doing today compatible with what's in that section. And then in the future, if you do change 513, then the zone districts can be re-examined. We gotta kind of, you know.
But my understanding is you got the linkage, and then from a political standpoint, the percentage of mitigation is adjusted to what seems to be acceptable. And I think that the one unit out of the 3 units is probably low.
Yeah, yeah, so what we can do though is, I think right now we're stuck we have the base of one per 3. But if we want to start giving incentives that go, 2 per 4, and, just 3 per 5 and keep going up, totally, I think, how complicated we're gonna make the math, but, we can do something with that, but I do think the 1 per 3 is kind of our floor, and we build on that. And we build on it in the incentive side.
So then if we want to really incentivize it, then we have to make the by right uses unattractive. Either by leaving it at 1 per 35 or by saying like 3 DU per acre. Because if the goal is to get more free markets and we can't do it because the linkage document in section 5-13 or whatever, then we could say you can have 3 DU per acre. One of them has to be deed restricted and you can have your other 2. But with the density bonuses, you could actually have 10 or 20 free market units if you build 50 or 100 units. And all of a sudden the money is like coming out of your ears then, because you're building so much more.
Well, it's not by right.
Not by right.
That's via PUD.
That's via density bonus.
No, the density
Not
bonus,
PUD.
not PUD.
By the density bonuses like on screen.
So we could still change the by right number to be like something that's not 1 per 35, but it's just not very attractive.
Yeah.
If you have the opportunity to build 100 units, why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah, what I'm seeing here, on the, so if we allowed 15 dwelling units per acre, 5 of those would have to be deed restricted. They would have to do that. And then if we let them go up to, 20, so say we went to the 20 dwelling units per acre, and instead of needing 6, we say, well, if you're gonna go to 20, you've got to give us 7 or 8. That's where the difference comes in, is that as you go through the density bonus, you get additional density, but you also ratchet up the amount of mitigation. And that's what we need to figure out how to articulate.
Totally agree. But I think leaving it without increasing the proposed density by right, back to Jared's point.
Yeah.
Not gonna do that. All right. We got to break some eggs here, people. I think we have to have a higher density, right? For the high density, just doesn't make any sense otherwise.
For free market.
I think the free market question needs to get resolved in the
Section
sorry.
513, yeah.
But then the ratio.
Yeah, none of these, low, medium, high density zones. And they're going to be providing some mitigation. Depending on the number of lots that they're creating. Or the number of units that they're building. So, I don't see. Yeah, I personally don't have a problem with the proposed density by right. But then we give the incentive beyond that, because knowing that in the proposed density by right, we're still getting mitigation.
Right.
We're still getting units.
Mhm.
It's the, it's then the, moving above, that's the incentives.
And it was mentioned earlier, but one of the things we're looking into, if I'm remembering correctly, is that, and Nick and others have suggested this before, is making the mitigation, opening up the potential mitigation to land instead of units.
Sorry.
She's right. And you know, maybe that can work to our advantage if someone's in the high density and they give us to mitigate, they give us instead of, you know, they give us 20 acres, however the math works out, and we can put something more dense on there because we can.
Well, so what are the numbers? Like, I'm having a hard time imagining what 37% of 19 is. And what is that, a 25% density bonus above and beyond the 1 out of 3 we already have? What's the spiel?
Yeah, we were trying to go above the 1 out of 3, but to your point, it's not that much above. So I think we need to calibrate the density bonuses. Maybe the next step actually is at 50% and then 100%.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rather than 37, and they're just too small, is what
Yes.
I'm hearing. And so I think we have already have the 1 to 3 built in. I think the next step that you get any kind of density bonus at is 50%.
Mhm.
And then if there's 100%, then you get the gigantic bonus. Okay. I want to bring forward one extra thing, just building off of Hallie. It's just something that's been ruminating in my mind. We have these 3 very small parcels identified for high. And I'm not trying to lead you guys at all. I just want to throw out like the opposite side of this. If we don't change that base density, you really could get 1 DU per 35 acres in the 3 very small areas that we've already identified as wanting that high density. And I think we're all saying the same thing, that we don't want that we really want to push for something else. So maybe to Hallie's point, leaving it low is where we just really push those density bonuses so high that it's so incentivized that you're never going to get the 1 per 35. I would just hate to create a scenario where the worst case scenario is 1 per 35 in the high density.
But I mean, aren't those parcels owned by individuals that are already planning on, except for the Forest Service land? One of them's Alexander property. The other one is Pathfinder.
That's medium.
Oh, that's medium. What was the other
But
little
same
one?
question.
Yeah.
So,
At the.
you know,
But
it's,
that's the point to me.
yeah.
For that.
It, you know, it's largely Forest Service, Mountain Village, and Alexander. You know, Alexander could go any number of routes.
Yeah, so we're talking about what might, you know, future zoning might happen. Something might turn into high density that we don't realize yet. That something might be changed to high density.
Not according to the master.
So I'm looking at the numbers and it almost seems like we need to work backwards then. We're gonna give them the maximum density for 100% or for like 9 out of 10 or something. What is that max density that we want to see? And then we can work backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with 100%.
The 100% deed restricted. Yeah.
We're still talking about the high density zone district.
Yeah. So 100%, what's the maximum you can build on a high density lot if it's all deed restricted?
This is where we get to Nick's concept of caps, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
you
'cause
could
you go all
get
the
up
way
to
over there.
40 DUs per acre. It's pretty easy on that.
Is 40 the number?
How big is the property?
Right.
Well, we still have the minimum lot sizes. But how big is the I mean, it's the Forest Service, it's all
Depends
building.
Yeah.
Depends on the building height, unit sizes. If you did small efficiency units, you could get a lot more in a building than you could at
Yeah,
a
the,
2-bedroom unit.
yeah, if you were you know, with the current 40 to 80 people per acre. Conservative, right, well, no, you have not say conservative, but you're looking at anywhere from 10 to 40 units per acre, depending on their size.
And depending on their water,
Mm-hmm.
all these are most
Yes.
locations, so. You know, we
Now
don't have
these-
to write a rule because
Yeah.
water's coming through.
Really messed up, like, it'll just.
I'm gonna interject. We are out of time if we are all serious about ending at noon. We're also at the point that we've all wanted to get to for a long time. So we have a choice. We can decide to reconvene and be appreciative of everyone's time today, or we can decide as a group to extend this conversation and see where we get in the next half hour or hour and just take as much time as we need. I'm happy to stay. Is there anybody that needs to go because they've got an appointment at noon? Paul. Okay. Is there anybody on Zoom that needs to go, or can you stay? Tony, the thumb up means you can stay? Okay.
I have to go.
Many of us have.
No, I have to go.
Okay. What I'm realizing is that we did this upside down. We should have hit the hard thing first. And here we are, needing to, I think, continue this conversation with a reschedule.
So could I just interject? Sorry, Kay. I think we need a straw man on the bonuses to work backwards. So
Okay.
what are those bonuses? Is 100% affordable? What is that deed restriction? Because that's a material, because a lot of this is about the economics. Am I gonna build a for sale market-based product and be incentivized to do some affordable housing? But we need to kind of think about those bonuses. I think we've got to see that on paper or suggestions of what those are.
I agree.
We can put together some scenarios, some thought behind that, put that back out to the group. And then have a subsequent conversation.
Agreed.
Because I'm really absorbing this conversation and I think I've got a really good idea of how we can go, but I want to give some reasoning behind it, not just throw out numbers, give you guys some.
Okay. Let's do this then, Jen. Let's rely on your group for that math and those suggestions, and that'll give us something to respond to. When you have that done, send that to us with a poll for another meeting, and we'll wedge it in. There's no reason that we have to meet any real deadline. We just want to. And we will try to pull together another meeting with those numbers in front of us soon.
And we've got, so, from what we've got so far today, we're gonna take that, we're gonna kind of put together a summary and also, some ideas on where to go. And we've got the July 29th Joint Planning Commission and BOCC work session, so I'm sure we'll get ideas out of that as well. And then after that, we'll pull it all together, probably have an updated draft at that point where we can come back and talk about it one more time. And so we won't set that meeting.
What I'm hearing you say is that we will take the updated concepts from Jen, vet them via email, receive comment, and then submit that to the CPC in the BOCC meeting? Question mark?
Or we come July 29th.
Yeah. That was my comment.
What I'm saying is we'll do a summary of what we've talked about so far.
Mm-hmm.
And we will give that to the Planning Commission, the BOCC, get the input there. And then hopefully from that, we can come back to you clarifying and answering a lot of the things that we've talked about today.
Okay. I feel like it would be useful to let the CPC and rest of the commissioners hear where we are kind of headed, even though we don't have the actual numbers that Jen's going to send us, because that's really the only thing we've decided today that is going to make a rat's ass. And if we just talk about the relatively small setback adjustments and ADUs, we are giving them very little food for thought.
Yeah, and I
So-
think we can come up with some clarifying information
Okay.
that just helps the conversation.
I'll throw some dates out there really quick.
Please.
If we were to get you guys something by mid next week. The CPC, the joint work session is the following week.
Yeah, our
Is
packet
it-
deadline's Thursday.
Yeah, is it feasible that we could have some sort of discussion with this group like that Monday or Tuesday before the joint work session?
What are those
It
dates?
wouldn't be in the packet, the 27th. Would it be in the packet so we could still report back to that joint work session on what the final direction was?
Let's start with the 27th, which is a Monday. Is Monday not possible for anybody? Amy,
I'm gone the week of the 27th.
Okay.
So
okay?
Yeah.
We are gonna miss you, but we're gonna continue to try to find a date.
The two bodies not having any time. Whatever you come up with.
Is
Yeah,
there
that's
a
true.
reason that tonight needs to happen?
It's a combination of a lot of different calendars and Kay's desire to try to keep this process alive.
Still have the subdivision changes.
Yeah.
Question.
That'll be in August. Yeah, it is such challenge to find meeting time and space.
I get that. I
Yeah.
just feel like the whole point of that is to talk about this and we're not done. And I said
Correct.
that last week too. I
Correct.
don't understand about
Yeah,
if we're not done.
I think that. Yeah, I think it would be useful to hear from everybody as we, get farther along. But,
I think it makes sense to go ahead until April 29th. We've got 2 commissioners who aren't here, and we've got 4 colleagues that are actually,
Right. We have incomplete recommendations, so we're just gonna say. here's what we
The
got.
27th.
I know if I were a commissioner, specifically a board of county commissioners who have not been at these sessions, and I come in and I get thrown the mess that we have right now, I would not appreciate it. I'd want to have a succinct recommendation so you can dive into it. I mean, it's hard to come into these issues without having something tangible.
And that's why I think Jen's asking if we could do a meeting on the 27th with as many people as available. Elaine?
Hmm?
27th is possible. Okay? From the 27th is possible, morning or afternoon?
I'm good all day.
Okay? Before 4, there we go. We've got one parameter. We met this morning at 9 o'clock and we blocked out 3 hours. We got a lot done, but we have encountered the elephant. Let's meet at 9 in the morning on the 27th and block out till noon. And if we get done early, then it's a bonus.
We have to check on a space though, right? Because we don't know.
Is there,
this room is available, and up until 4 o'clock on that day.
so let's block out 9 to noon in this room on Monday, the 27th. And
You'll get us
Amy, I'm sorry.
information before.
We'll do our best.
I'm out of town.
Okay.
We can,
What?
we can put it up on Conveo or something, so people who are not able to make that meeting can still weigh in on it.
Okay.
Well, anyone can weigh in on it, even if you're gonna be at the meeting. That gives you time to kind of put some thoughts down.
I don't think I saw any of your comments when I looked at it just last night.
Yeah, I don't know what happened, but
Or email for your comments?
Yeah, email us your comments for sure, and then maybe we could set up a quick Zoom call to look through what's going on.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
There
This
is
was a
comments
good one,
coming up.
and there's one more to come before we actually present anything. Pardon?
Close, I think we really worked through a lot of the.
We got to the elephant. Have a great afternoon, folks. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Nina. Thank you, staff, for running this thing.